When an invisible janitor makes one choice at a company party that no executive dares to make, he has no idea that act of quiet courage will shatter everything he thought he knew about his place in the world and force a powerful CEO to confront the ghosts of her own forgotten past. If you're ready to discover how one night can rewrite two lives forever, stay with me until the very end of this story. And if you believe kindness still matters in a world that often forgets to look down, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, let me take you into Ethan Cole's world. The fluorescent lights hummed their tired song across the 15th floor of Hale Industries, casting everything in that particular shade of corporate sterile that Ethan Cole had come to know as intimately as his own reflection. He pushed his cleaning cart past glass-walled conference rooms where decisions worth millions had been made earlier that day, past executive offices with their leather chairs and mahogany desks, past motivational posters that proclaimed everyone was valued, everyone mattered, everyone was seen. Ethan had learned years ago that those posters weren't meant for men like him. His reflection caught in the darkened windows, a lean man in his late 30s with tired eyes and work-worn hands, wearing the gray uniform that rendered him functionally invisible to the people who walked these halls during daylight hours. He'd perfected the art of being unnoticed, of moving through spaces without disturbing the air, of existing in the margins of other people's important lives. "Dad?" The voice crackled through his earbuds, small and sleep-rough. Ethan smiled despite the ache in his lower back, despite the knowledge that he still had 4 more floors to clean before his shift ended at 2 in the morning. "Hey, Lilybug," he said softly, pausing his cart beside a window that overlooked the glittering sprawl of the city. "What are you doing awake? It's past 11. "I had a dream," his 9-year-old daughter said. "You were wearing a fancy suit, and everyone was clapping for you." Ethan's throat tightened. Lily had always possessed an imagination too big for their small apartment, dreams too bright for a girl whose father scrubbed floors for a living. He loved that about her even as it terrified him, the gap between what she deserved and what he could give her. "Sounds like a nice dream, sweetheart." It felt real. She yawned, and he could picture her in her bed, surrounded by the library books she devoured like other kids consumed candy. "Are you coming home soon?" "Few more hours. Mrs. Chen is there if you need anything, okay?" "I know." A pause. "Dad? The party is tonight, right? The big company one?" Ethan glanced toward the conference center on the 20th floor where he'd spent the afternoon helping the event staff set up. Crystal glasses arranged in precise rows, champagne bottles chilling in silver buckets, flower arrangements that cost more than his monthly rent. A celebration for people who belonged in rooms like that. "Yeah, it's tonight. You should go." He almost laughed. "Lily, that's not... I can't just go to the company party. That's for the executives, the important people." "You're important," she said with the absolute certainty only a child could muster. "And you work there. You should go." "I work there at night, cleaning up after everyone else goes home. It's different." "Why?" The question hung in the air between them, simple and devastating. Why was it different? Because he wore gray instead of tailored suits? Because his hands were calloused from mop handles instead of soft from signing contracts? Because the world had drawn invisible lines that people like him weren't supposed to cross? "It just is, baby." "I think you should go," Lily insisted. "I think something good would happen if you did." Ethan closed his eyes, pressing his forehead against the cool glass. His daughter believed in magic, not the fairy tale kind, but the everyday variety, the kind where good things happened to good people, where hard work was rewarded, where invisible men could suddenly be seen. He'd stopped believing in that magic somewhere between his wife leaving and the medical bills that still arrived like clockwork, reminders of Lily's emergency appendectomy 2 years ago. But he couldn't bear to extinguish that light in his daughter's voice. "We'll see," he said gently. "Now you need to sleep. School tomorrow. Promise me you'll think about it?" "I promise I'll think about it. Love you, Lilybug." "Love you too, Dad." The line went quiet, leaving Ethan alone with the hum of fluorescent lights and the weight of promises he wasn't sure he could keep. He resumed his routine, emptying trash cans, wiping down desks, erasing the evidence of other people's productive days. Each office told a story, family photos in expensive frames, Diplomas from universities he could never afford. Coffee mugs with inspirational quotes about reaching for the stars. Ethan reached for his spray bottle instead. He was finishing the 14th floor when he heard them, voices echoing up the emergency stairwell, the kind of laughter that came from people who'd already had a few drinks. The party had started an hour ago, and apparently some of the younger executives had decided the outdoor balcony was the perfect place for a cigarette break. Did you see Johnson trying to pitch his quarterly projections to Victoria while she was clearly trying to enjoy her drink? A woman's voice, sharp with amusement. The man has no sense of timing. Johnson has no sense, period, a male voice responded. But he's not wrong to be worried. I heard the restructuring rumors. Some departments are getting consolidated after New Year's. Ethan's hand stilled on the desk he was wiping. Restructuring, consolidation, corporate words that meant real people losing real jobs. Well, whoever survives better make themselves visible tonight, another voice chimed in. FaceTime with the CEO, you know. Let her see you're indispensable. Their laughter faded as they headed back to the party, leaving Ethan alone with the sick feeling in his stomach. He knew he should keep working, should finish his route, and stay safely in his lane, but Lily's words kept echoing in his head. You should go. I think something good would happen. He thought about the gray uniform he wore, the one that made him invisible. He thought about his daughter, who believed in everyday magic. He thought about the fact that he'd been working at Hale Industries for 7 years and had never once been to a company event, never once been acknowledged as anything more than a line item in the facility's budget. The party was on the 20th floor. His cart was on the 14th. Between them lay 6 floors and a gulf of social stratification he'd never dared to cross. Ethan looked at his watch. 9:45. His supervisor wouldn't check on him for at least another hour. The 20th floor was technically on his route. He was supposed to clean it after the party ended, but that didn't mean he couldn't go up early just to see, just to prove to his daughter that he'd tried. He left his cart in a supply closet and took the service elevator up, his heart hammering against his ribs in a way that felt ridiculous. It was just a party. He wasn't crashing the White House. But as the doors opened onto the 20th floor, the sound of music and laughter washing over him like a wave, Ethan felt his courage wavering. The conference center had been transformed. The fluorescent lights were gone, replaced by warm, golden lighting that made everything glow. The long tables he'd helped set up were laden with food he couldn't name, artful arrangements that looked too beautiful to eat. People clustered in groups, wine glasses catching the light, designer dresses and tailored suits moving in a choreographed dance of corporate networking. Ethan stood in the doorway, suddenly hyper-aware of his gray uniform, his worn sneakers, the smell of cleaning solution that probably clung to his clothes. No one looked at him, not because he was invisible, he'd grown used to that, but because he genuinely didn't belong here, and everyone knew it, including him. Can I help you? The voice came from a young woman in a black dress holding a clipboard, her smile professionally polite and utterly dismissive. One of the event coordinators he'd seen earlier, though she clearly didn't remember him. Ethan started, then stopped. What was he? An employee? Technically true, but not in the way that mattered here. A party crasher? Closer to the truth. A father trying to keep a promise to his daughter? I work here. Just thought The service staff entrance is around back, she said, her smile never wavering. If you're with catering, you'll want to check in with Maria. No, I'm not. I work here, for the company. She glanced at his uniform, and her expression shifted into something that might have been pity or might have been discomfort. Oh, well, this is really more of a corporate celebration for the leadership teams and their guests, but I'm sure there's something nice planned for the facilities staff at a different time. There wasn't. There never was. But Ethan nodded anyway, backing toward the elevator with his face burning. What had he been thinking? That he could just walk into this world and belong? That the invisible lines that governed his life would somehow disappear because his daughter dreamed about him in a fancy suit? He was reaching for the elevator button when he heard it. Oh my God, is she seriously crying? The voice came from a cluster of younger executives near the bar, their faces lit by the glow of their phone screens. Ethan glanced over and saw them looking toward the far corner of the room, where the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. Someone should do something, another voice said. though the tone suggested that someone should definitely not be them. Are you kidding? That's Victoria Hale. You don't approach the CEO when she's having a moment. Career suicide. Is she drunk? Completely. Been at that bar for an hour. Marcus tried to talk to her earlier and she almost bit his head off. Curiosity pulled Ethan forward a few steps, just enough to see past the crowd. There, seated alone at the far end of the bar, was a woman in a burgundy dress that probably cost more than Ethan's car. Her dark hair was coming loose from its elegant updo, and even from this distance, he could see the unsteady way she reached for her wine glass. Victoria Hale, the CEO. The woman whose name was on the building, whose decision shaped the lives of thousands of employees, including his own. Ethan had seen her exactly 3 times in 7 years, always from a distance, always surrounded by an entourage of assistants and executives, always moving with the kind of purpose that came from knowing exactly where you belonged in the world. She didn't look purposeful now. She looked drunk and alone and utterly abandoned in a room full of her own employees. "Where's her driver?" someone whispered. "She gave him the night off. Apparently she was planning to leave with the Hendersons, but they left an hour ago without telling her." Typical. Everyone wants FaceTime with the CEO when she's powerful and put together. The moment she shows vulnerability, suddenly we're all very busy elsewhere. Laughter rippled through the group, nervous and cruel in equal measure. Ethan watched as people pulled out their phones, angles shifting to capture the CEO in her moment of weakness. By tomorrow, this would be office gossip. By Monday, it would be a cautionary tale. By next month, it would be a joke. He should leave. This wasn't his problem, wasn't his world. He was the janitor, the invisible man, the person who existed in the margins while people like Victoria Hale commanded the center. Getting involved would be overstepping, presumptuous, potentially job-ending. But then Victoria lifted her head, and for just a moment her eyes found his across the room. She didn't recognize him. How could she? They'd never spoken, never existed in the same sphere. But in that brief second of eye contact, Ethan saw something that made his chest ache with recognition. He saw someone who was invisible too. Not invisible in the way he was, ignored by choice, rendered irrelevant by circumstance, but invisible in a different, equally painful way, surrounded by people and utterly alone, powerful and completely unseen. The kind of invisible that came from being so elevated that you stopped being human in other people's eyes. Lily's voice echoed in his memory. "I think something good would happen if you did." This wasn't good. This was messy and complicated and absolutely none of his business. But as Ethan watched Victoria Hale sitting alone at that bar, as he watched executives whisper and phones come out, and absolutely no one step forward to help, he thought about his daughter who believed in everyday magic. He thought about the kind of man he wanted to be when Lily looked at him. And then, before he could talk himself out of it, Ethan Cole walked across the room toward the most powerful person in the building. Every step felt like walking through water. Conversations quieted as he passed. He felt eyes on him, felt the weight of his gray uniform like a brand. The event coordinator from earlier started to move toward him, probably to escort him out, but Ethan kept walking. Victoria didn't look up as he approached. Up close, he could see the mascara smudged beneath her eyes, the slight tremor in her hands as she reached for her glass. The bartender, a young guy who looked deeply uncomfortable, was making himself busy at the far end of the bar. "Ms. Hale?" His voice came out quieter than he'd intended, but she heard it. Her head lifted slowly, unfocused eyes trying to find him in the dim light. "Who?" She blinked hard. "Do I know you?" "No, ma'am. I'm Ethan. I work here." "Everyone here works here," she said, gesturing vaguely at the room. "That's why it's called a company party." The words were slightly slurred, her usual sharp precision softened by wine. "Yes, ma'am." Ethan glanced back at the watching crowd, then made a decision. He lowered his voice, speaking for her ears only. "I think maybe you've had a long night. Can I help you get home safely?" Victoria's laugh was bitter and startling. "Home safely? That's very thoughtful. But I'm fine. Perfectly fine. See?" She lifted her wine glass in a toast to no one, sloshing a little onto the bar. Picture of professionalism. "I don't doubt it," Ethan said carefully. "But even professionals deserve to get home safe. Your driver." I gave Jonathan the night off. His daughter's in a school play. She said it like an accusation, like kindness was something to be ashamed of. Very magnanimous of me, wasn't it? And then the Hendersons, who swore they'd give me a ride, left without me because Greg got a call about some emergency with his portfolio. She wasn't just drunk, Ethan realized. She was hurt, and trying very hard to pretend she wasn't. Then let me drive you, he said. My car's not fancy, but it runs. I can have you home in 20 minutes. You? Victoria finally focused on him properly, taking in the gray uniform with its embroidered name tag. Your facilities? Night shift janitor, yes ma'am. Something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe, or confusion? Why would you? She stopped, shook her head. No, thank you, but no. I'll call a car service, or I'll walk. It's only… She squinted at the windows as if trying to calculate distance. Far, it's far, but I have excellent shoes for walking. She tried to stand, swayed dangerously, and Ethan instinctively reached out to steady her elbow. Her skin was warm beneath his hand, and he could feel how carefully she was holding herself together, all that formidable control barely containing the mess beneath. Ms. Hale, he said gently, with all due respect, those shoes aren't going to get you to the parking lot, let alone home. And it's December. It's freezing outside. I'm aware of the temperature, Ethan. His name sounded strange in her mouth, like she was testing the weight of it. I'm drunk, not stupid. I never said you were stupid. I said you were drunk and alone. And I'm offering to help. Why? The question was sharp, cutting through the wine-softened edges. Why would you do that? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. If anything, She gestured vaguely. I owe you. Your paycheck. Your health care. She trailed off, lost in whatever thought had seized her. Ethan could feel the room watching them, could practically hear the furious texting happening in every corner. This was going to be tomorrow's gossip, regardless of what he did. The only question was whether it would be the story of the janitor who overstepped his bounds, or the story of the janitor who did the right thing when no one else would. Lily's face rose in his mind. What kind of man do you want to be when I look at you? Because someone should, Ethan said simply. And everyone else seems to be busy. Victoria stared at him for a long moment, something shifting behind her eyes. Then, slowly, she nodded. Okay, she whispered. Okay. Getting her to the elevator required careful navigation. Ethan kept one hand lightly on her elbow, guiding more than supporting, trying to preserve what dignity he could for both of them. The crowd parted like water, silent and staring. The event coordinator tried to intercept them halfway across the room. Sir, I don't think… Ms. Hale isn't feeling well, Ethan said firmly. I'm taking her home. Perhaps we should let the woman have some privacy, Ethan said, his voice harder than he'd intended. The coordinator stepped back, and Ethan immediately felt guilty. She was just doing her job, same as him. But right now, his job was getting Victoria Hale out of this room before the phones captured anything else. The elevator ride down was silent except for the mechanical hum of descent. Victoria leaned against the back wall, eyes closed, breathing carefully. Ethan stood near the doors, giving her space, trying not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. What floor? Victoria asked suddenly. Ma'am? What floor do you clean? Which one's yours? Ethan blinked at the odd question. I rotate. Monday through Wednesday, I do 14 through 18. Thursday and Friday, I do the upper floors, 19 through 23. 7 years, she murmured. You've been here 7 years? He turned to look at her, surprised. How did you… I know everyone who's been here more than 5 years. Not personally, but… She opened her eyes, and they were clearer now, more focused. The system flags it. Loyalty bonuses. I see the names. Ethan Cole. Night maintenance. 7 years, 3 months. She laughed softly. I'm very drunk, but I still remember the reports. The elevator opened onto the parking garage, and the cold December air rushed in to greet them. Ethan's beat-up Honda Civic was parked in the far corner, under a flickering light that maintenance kept meaning to fix. It looked even more pathetic than usual next to the BMWs and Mercedes that filled the executive spaces. That's your car? Victoria asked as they approached it. Yes, ma'am. It's very honest. Despite everything, Ethan almost smiled. It gets me where I need to go. He unlocked the passenger door, cleared away the library books Lily had left on the seat, Harry Potter, and the Sorcerer's Stone, well worn and beloved, and helped Victoria settle in. She moved carefully, like someone negotiating with gravity, and when she was finally seated, she let out a long breath. Seatbelt, Ethan reminded gently, and she fumbled with it until he reached over to help, his hands briefly brushing hers. Her fingers were cold despite the warmth of the building. He climbed into the driver's seat, and the car's interior light illuminated them both in its harsh glow. This close, Ethan could see the fine lines around Victoria's eyes, the exhaustion beneath the expensive makeup. She looked older than she did in the company photos, and somehow more real. Where to? He asked. She rattled off an address in Riverside Heights, the kind of neighborhood where houses had gates and gardeners and price tags that made Ethan's apartment rent look like pocket change. Of course, that's where she lived. Where else would the CEO of Hale Industries live? The car started on the second try. It always did, faithful despite its age, and Ethan pulled out of the garage into the December night. The city streets were quiet at this hour, holiday lights reflecting off wet pavement, storefronts dark except for their security lights. They drove in silence for the first few minutes. Ethan kept the radio off, unsure what music would be appropriate for this surreal situation. Victoria stared out the window, her reflection ghostly in the glass. "Do you have children?" she asked suddenly. The question caught Ethan off guard. "Yes, a daughter. Lily. She's 9. 9. Victoria turned to look at him. "That's a good age. Still believes in things." "She does." Ethan smiled despite himself. "Too many things, probably. She thinks the world is basically fair, that good things happen to good people." "You don't believe that?" He considered the question as he turned onto the highway. "I believe the world is what you make of it, and sometimes what you make of it isn't enough, but you keep trying anyway." "For her." "For her," he agreed. "She's why I work nights. The pay's better, and I can be with her during the day when she's home from school. Mrs. Chen, our neighbor, she watches her while I sleep. Then I'm up in time to help with homework, make dinner, all the normal dad stuff. Then I go to work and do it all again." "Her mother?" "Left when Lily was 3. The words came easier than they used to. Said she didn't sign up for this life, and I guess she was right. We were young, thought we could make it work on love and determination. Turns out the world requires more than that." "I'm sorry." Ethan glanced at her, surprised by the genuine sympathy in her voice. "It's okay. We're okay. It's not the life I planned, but..." He thought about Lily's smile, the way she hugged him before bed every night, how she still believed he could do anything. "It's enough. It has to be." More silence. The highway stretched ahead of them, nearly empty. Ethan's hands were steady on the wheel, but his mind was racing. Tomorrow, he'd have to face the consequences of this decision. The whispers, the questions, maybe even disciplinary action for overstepping his bounds. But tonight, right now, he was just a man driving another human being home safely. "Why did you help me?" Victoria's voice was soft, almost lost beneath the hum of the engine. "I told you. Because someone should." "But why you? You could have walked away. Everyone else did. The people who work directly for me, who depend on me for their careers, their livelihoods, they all saw me there and chose to protect themselves instead." She turned to face him fully. "So why would you? Someone I've never spoken to, someone who has nothing to gain and potentially a lot to lose, why would you step forward?" Ethan drove for a moment before answering, choosing his words carefully. "A few months ago, Lily got sick at school. High fever, they called me in the middle of my shift. I left work early, first time in 7 years, and rushed to get her. But my car wouldn't start, dead battery, and I'm standing in that parking garage, panicking, because my daughter needs me, and I can't get to her." He paused, remembering the fear. This guy I'd never seen before, visiting some executive for a meeting, he saw me trying to jump-start the car. He could have kept walking, had no reason to help some janitor having a bad day, but he stopped, helped me with his cables, followed me to the school to make sure I got there okay. "And?" Victoria prompted. And I asked him why. Why help me? And he said, because I hope someone would do the same for me. Ethan met her eyes briefly before returning his attention to the road. So when I saw you tonight, alone and everyone else walking away, I thought about that stranger. And I thought about the kind of man I want to be when my daughter looks at me. Victoria was quiet for so long that Ethan thought maybe she'd fallen asleep. But when he glanced over, her eyes were open, staring at something he couldn't see. My father was a janitor, she said finally. School custodian. Worked nights, just like you. I'd wait up for him sometimes, even though my mother said I shouldn't. He'd come home exhausted, smelling like floor cleaner and cafeteria food, and he'd still ask me about my day, still help with my homework, still tell me I could be anything I wanted. Her voice cracked slightly. He died of a heart attack when I was 16, dropped dead in the middle of mopping the gym floor. They found him the next morning. I'm sorry, Ethan said quietly. Everyone at school sent flowers. The principal gave a lovely speech about his dedication. Then they hired someone else and forgot about him within a week. Victoria's hands clenched in her lap. I promised myself that day that I'd never be invisible like he was. I'd be so successful, so powerful, that people would have to see me, have to acknowledge me. You succeeded. Did I? She laughed bitterly. I built an empire, Ethan. Hale Industries is worth billions. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. And tonight, when I needed help, every single person who works for me, who benefits from my success, chose to protect themselves instead. I was just as invisible as my father ever was. Ethan didn't have an answer for that. What could he say? That power and visibility weren't the same thing? That being seen required vulnerability, not just success? All of it felt inadequate in the face of her pain. They exited the highway onto tree-lined streets where the houses sat behind walls and gates. Victoria directed him through the quiet neighborhood until they reached a driveway with an iron gate. She produced a remote from her purse, and the gate swung open to reveal a house that looked like something from a magazine. Modern lines, floor-to-ceiling windows, landscaping that probably required a full-time staff. Ethan pulled up to the front door and put the car in park. The interior light clicked on as Victoria opened her door, and for a moment they both sat there, neither quite ready to end this strange intersection of their separate worlds. Thank you, Victoria said, for the ride, for... She gestured vaguely. Everything. You're welcome. Will you be okay from here? I'll be fine. The security system knows me, even drunk. She stepped out, then paused, bending down to look back into the car. Ethan? What you did tonight, it was kind, but it was also potentially very stupid from a career standpoint. His stomach dropped. I understand if there are consequences. I wasn't trying to... I'm not threatening you, she interrupted. I'm warning you. By tomorrow, everyone at that party will have their own version of what happened. Some of those versions won't be kind to either of us. I know. And you helped anyway. I helped anyway. Victoria studied him for a long moment, and Ethan had the uncomfortable feeling of being truly seen for the first time in years, not assessed or dismissed or overlooked, but genuinely observed by someone who was really looking. Your daughter, Victoria said. Lily, she's lucky to have you. Before Ethan could respond, she straightened up and closed the door. He watched her walk to her front door, slightly unsteady but determined, until she was safely inside. The door closed behind her, lights blooming to life in the windows. Ethan sat in his car for a moment longer, processing what had just happened. Then he pulled out his phone and sent a quick text to Lily. Went to the party like you said. Interesting night. Tell you about it tomorrow. Love you. The response came almost immediately. I knew something good would happen. Love you too, Dad. Ethan smiled, pocketing his phone. He backed out of the driveway, the gate closing behind him with a soft clang, and headed home to his own modest apartment across town. He had no idea that the good thing Lily predicted was only beginning, and he had no idea that in less than 12 hours, Victoria Hale would change his life in ways he couldn't possibly imagine. For now, he was just tired, ready for his shift to end, ready to go home and sleep before Lily woke up for school. Just an invisible man who'd made one small choice, unaware that sometimes the smallest choices cast the longest shadows. The alarm clock's shrill beep pulled Ethan from a sleep that felt like it had lasted only minutes. 4:30 in the morning. His body protested as he reached over to silence it, every muscle reminding him that he'd only gotten 3 hours of rest after finishing his shift and the unexpected detour to Riverside Heights. He lay there for a moment in the dark, staring at the water-stained ceiling of his bedroom, wondering if last night had actually happened. Had he really driven the CEO of Hale Industries home? Had Victoria Hale really told him about her father, shared pieces of herself that Ethan suspected few people ever saw? His phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from his supervisor, Marcus. "Need to see you. My office. 6 a.m. Before your next shift." Ethan's stomach clenched. So it was starting already. The consequences Victoria had warned him about. He sat up slowly, running his hands through his hair, trying to calculate how bad this could get. Best case scenario, a formal reprimand in his file. Worst case, termination for inappropriate conduct with a senior executive. He thought about Lily sleeping in the next room, about the bills that wouldn't stop coming whether he had a job or not, about the health insurance he couldn't afford to lose. Maybe he should have walked away last night. Maybe kindness was a luxury that men in his position couldn't afford. But even as the thought formed, Ethan knew he didn't believe it. He'd made a choice based on who he wanted to be, not on what was safest. Whatever came next, he'd face it the same way he'd faced everything else since the day his wife walked out, one step at a time, doing his best to keep moving forward. He showered quickly in water that never quite got hot enough, dressed in a clean version of the same gray uniform, and made coffee that tasted like burnt regret. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic beginning to build on the street below. Through Lily's half-open door, he could see her sprawled across her bed, one arm hanging off the edge, completely at peace in the way only children could be. Ethan kissed his fingers and pressed them gently to her doorframe, a ritual he'd started when she was a baby and never quite stopped. Then he grabbed his keys and headed out into the December darkness. The drive to Hale Industries felt longer than usual, every red light a small eternity. Ethan's mind kept replaying the previous night, searching for moments where he'd overstepped, things he should have said differently, ways he could have helped without drawing so much attention. But each time he circled back to the same truth. There had been no subtle way to help a drunk CEO when every other person in that room had chosen to look away. The parking garage was nearly empty at this hour. Just a few cars belonging to the early morning security staff and the handful of employees who started before dawn. Ethan parked in his usual spot and took the service elevator up to the third floor where the facilities management offices were located. Marcus was waiting in his cramped office, sitting behind a desk buried under maintenance reports and supply requisitions. He was a heavy-set man in his 50s with the tired eyes of someone who'd worked his way up from the same positions he now supervised. He looked up as Ethan knocked on the open door, and his expression was impossible to read. "Close the door," Marcus said. "Sit down." Ethan obeyed, his heart hammering against his ribs. The office smelled like old coffee and industrial soap, familiar scents that now felt ominous in context. Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying Ethan in silence for a long moment. "You want to tell me what the hell you were thinking last night?" "I was thinking someone needed help," Ethan said quietly. "Someone? You mean Victoria Hale, the CEO, the woman who runs this entire company?" "Yes." "And it didn't occur to you that maybe there were other people better qualified to help her? People who actually work with her, who know her, who have some kind of professional relationship that would make that interaction appropriate?" Ethan met Marcus's eyes steadily. There were about 200 people better qualified, and not one of them stepped forward. They were too busy taking pictures on their phones. Marcus's jaw tightened. "You don't know that. I was there. I saw it." "You were there in a gray uniform, Ethan. You were there as maintenance staff at a corporate event you had no business attending in the first place." Marcus rubbed his temples. "I got 6 calls this morning. 6. Before the sun even came up. From executives who were at that party, all asking me who the hell you think you are, overstepping your position, making inappropriate advances toward Ms. Hale." "That's not what happened," Ethan interrupted, his voice sharper than intended. "I drove her home safely because she was drunk and alone and everyone else abandoned her. That's all." "That's all?" Marcus laughed without humor. Ethan, you put yourself in a car alone with the most powerful person in this building while she was intoxicated. Do you understand how many HR violations that could represent? Do you understand the liability, the optics? I understand that she needed help and I provided it. Would you have preferred I left her there? I would have preferred you called her assistant, her driver, security, anyone whose actual job description includes dealing with executive matters. Marcus leaned forward, his voice dropping. Look, I get it. You're a good guy. You see someone in trouble, you want to help. But there are rules, Ethan. Boundaries. Lines you don't cross when you're in your position and they're in theirs. What position is that exactly? Ethan asked, surprising himself with the edge in his voice. The position where I'm supposed to pretend I don't see things? Where I'm invisible except when someone needs their trash emptied? The position where you have a daughter to support and bills to pay and a job you can't afford to lose because you decided to play hero. Marcus's expression softened slightly. I'm not trying to be harsh, Ethan. I'm trying to protect you. This building runs on hierarchy, on everyone staying in their lane. You stepped way out of yours. They sat in tense silence for a moment. Ethan could hear the building coming to life around them, elevators humming, distant voices, the mechanical sounds of another workday beginning. So what happens now? Ethan asked finally. Am I fired? Marcus sighed heavily. I don't know yet. I have to write up a report, submit it to HR. There'll be an investigation, probably. Interviews with people who were at the party, review of security footage. He paused. For what it's worth, I believe you had good intentions. But good intentions don't always protect you from consequences. I understand. Do you? Because this isn't like showing up late or calling in sick. This is about crossing professional boundaries with someone 40 levels above you on the org chart. Even if your intentions were pure, even if you did the right thing morally, it doesn't mean there won't be fallout. Ethan nodded slowly, feeling the weight of reality settling onto his shoulders. He'd known this was coming, but hearing it laid out so clearly made it real in a way it hadn't been before. Can I ask you something? Marcus said, his voice gentler now. Why did you even go to that party? In 7 years, you've never shown any interest in company events. My daughter, Ethan said simply. She asked me to go. Said she thought something good would happen if I did. Marcus's expression shifted into something that might have been sympathy or might have been pity. Kids, he muttered, they believe in magic. Yeah, Ethan agreed quietly. They do. Go home, Marcus said. Your shift tonight is canceled pending the investigation. You'll still get paid, but I need you to stay away from the building until this is resolved. Could be a few days, could be longer. I'll call you when I know more. Ethan stood, feeling unsteady despite having done nothing wrong. Marcus, what do you think will happen? The older man looked at him for a long moment before answering. Honestly, I think you're probably going to lose your job. And I'm sorry about that because you're one of the best workers I have. But this company protects its executives first and its maintenance staff last. That's just how it is. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Ethan nodded once, not trusting himself to speak, and left the office. The elevator ride down felt surreal. Suspended pay pending investigation, HR reviews, security footage, all because he'd helped someone who needed it. The injustice of it burned in his chest, but beneath the anger was fear, cold and practical and all too familiar. How would he explain this to Lily? How would he pay rent if this dragged on for weeks? What would he do if he actually lost this job? His phone buzzed as he reached his car. Another text, this one from a number he didn't recognize. This is Sarah Chen from HR. Please call me at your earliest convenience to schedule an interview regarding last night's incident. This is time sensitive. Incident. That's what it was being called. Not an act of kindness, not a human being helping another human being, an incident that required investigation and documentation and official statements. Ethan slumped into the driver's seat, his head falling back against the headrest. The parking garage was filling up now with the early arrivals, men and women in business suits carrying coffee cups and briefcases, heading into a building where they belonged, where they fit into neat boxes on organizational charts. He'd never fit into those boxes. Never wanted to, really. But he'd always believed that working hard, keeping his head down, doing his job well, that those things mattered. that competence and reliability were enough. Apparently they weren't. His phone buzzed again. Not HR this time, but a call from a local number. Ethan almost didn't answer, but something made him hit the accept button. Hello? Mr. Cole? This is James Mitchell, Ms. Hale's executive assistant. Ms. Hale has requested your presence at her office this morning at 8 o'clock sharp. Will that be possible? Ethan's mind went blank. Victoria wanted to see him? After everything. After the calls to Marcus. After the HR investigation. She wanted to see him? Mr. Cole, are you there? Yes, I'm here. He paused. I was told to stay away from the building pending an investigation. I'm aware of the situation. The assistant's voice was crisp and professional. Ms. Hale is also aware. Her request supersedes any other directives you may have received. Can you be here at 8? It was a command disguised as a question, the kind of polite corporate phrasing that meant you didn't actually have a choice. I'll be there, Ethan said. Excellent. When you arrive, come directly to the executive floor. 23rd. Security will be expecting you. The line went dead. Ethan sat in his car, staring at his phone, trying to process what had just happened. He'd been suspended and summoned in the same morning, told to stay away and called to the CEO's office. Nothing about this made sense. He had 90 minutes until the meeting. Not enough time to go home and back, too much time to just sit in his car. Ethan drove to a diner 3 blocks away, one of the 24-hour places that served the night shift workers and the insomniacs and the people whose lives didn't fit into normal business hours. The coffee was better than what he made at home, and the waitress didn't ask questions when he sat in a corner booth and stared at his phone like it might offer answers. He texted Mrs. Chen to let her know he'd be late getting home, then sent Lily a message even though she wouldn't see it until she woke up. Might be home late this morning. Something came up at work. Love you. The diner gradually filled with the breakfast crowd, construction workers and nurses ending night shifts, elderly couples who probably ate here every morning, a handful of people who looked as lost as Ethan felt. He watched them come and go, all these lives intersecting briefly in this fluorescent-lit space before spinning back out into their separate orbits. At 7:30, Ethan paid his bill and drove back to Hale Industries. The building looked different in daylight, less imposing somehow. The early morning sun caught the glass and steel, making it gleam like something aspirational, like the kind of place where dreams were supposed to come true if you worked hard enough. Ethan had worked hard for 7 years. He wondered if it had mattered at all. Security was indeed expecting him. The guard at the front desk checked his ID, made a phone call, then directed him to a private elevator that required a key card. The guard provided one, temporary access that would expire in 2 hours. 23rd floor, the guard said. Ms. Hale's assistant will meet you when the doors open. The elevator was different from the service ones Ethan used during his shifts. Clean carpet instead of industrial flooring, soft lighting instead of harsh fluorescence, the subtle scent of something expensive and floral. It rose smoothly and silently, floor numbers ticking past on a digital display. 23. The doors opened onto a reception area that looked like it belonged in a magazine spread. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city. The furniture was modern and minimal, everything in shades of cream and gray and chrome. A young man in an impeccable suit sat behind a curved desk, his fingers moving rapidly across a keyboard. He looked up as Ethan stepped out of the elevator, and his professional smile never wavered, even though Ethan could see the flicker of assessment in his eyes, taking in the gray uniform, the worn shoes, the everything that marked Ethan as someone who didn't belong here. Mr. Cole, the assistant said, standing. I'm James Mitchell. Thank you for coming. I'm not sure I had much choice, Ethan said honestly. A brief smile crossed James's face, there and gone. Ms. Hale can be quite persuasive. If you'll follow me. He led Ethan down a hallway lined with abstract art and awards in glass cases, past smaller offices where people were already at work, even though it wasn't quite 8 yet. Everything was hushed, efficient, expensive. At the end of the hall was a set of double doors, dark wood with chrome handles. James knocked once, then opened the door. Mr. Cole is here, Ms. Hale. Send him in. Thank you, James. The assistant stepped aside, and Ethan walked into Victoria Hale's office, his heart hammering. The space was enormous, probably bigger than his entire apartment. One wall was entirely windows, offering an even more spectacular view than the reception area. The other walls held more art, some photographs that looked personal rather than corporate, a bookshelf that actually seemed to be used rather than decorative. The desk was massive, dark wood that matched the doors, and behind it sat Victoria Hale. She looked nothing like the woman from last night. Gone was the burgundy dress, the smudged mascara, the wine-loose vulnerability. This Victoria wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Ethan's car, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun, her makeup perfect and professional. She looked like exactly what she was, one of the most powerful people in the business world. But when she looked at Ethan, her eyes held something he hadn't expected: uncertainty. "Please sit," she said, gesturing to one of the chairs across from her desk. Ethan sat, trying not to feel like he was being called to the principal's office. Victoria folded her hands on the desk, studying him with an intensity that made him want to look away. "I suppose you're wondering why I called you here," she began. "Among other things, yes. I want to apologize." Whatever Ethan had been expecting, it wasn't that. He blinked. "Apologize? For last night. For putting you in a difficult position. For—" She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. "For being vulnerable in a way that you felt compelled to respond to, and then for the consequences you're facing because of that response." "You didn't put me in any position," Ethan said. "I made a choice. I knew there might be consequences." "Did you? Did you really know that by morning, half the executives at that party would be calling for your termination? That HR would launch an investigation treating you like you'd committed some kind of assault? That your supervisor would suspend you?" "I knew it was possible." Victoria's expression hardened. "Well, I didn't. Or rather, I didn't think about it. I was too drunk and too upset to consider what helping me might cost you. And that was selfish." "You needed help. That's not selfish. Needing help isn't selfish. Accepting help without considering the helper's position, their vulnerability, that's selfish." She stood abruptly, walking to the windows. The morning light caught her profile, making her look both formidable and fragile. "Do you know what I did this morning, before the sun was even up?" "No, ma'am." "I reviewed security footage from last night. Every camera angle from the party, from the garage, from the lobby. I watched you help me to the elevator. I watched you drive away with me in your car. And do you know what I saw?" Ethan waited. "I saw a man being extraordinarily gentle with someone who didn't deserve it. Someone who'd gotten herself into an embarrassing situation through her own poor choices. I saw you protecting my dignity when no one else cared to. And then I read the reports that were already being filed, the accusations, the insinuations." Her voice turned hard. 6 different people claimed you were behaving inappropriately. 3 said you appeared to be taking advantage of my state. One particularly creative individual suggested you might have been planning to blackmail me. Anger flared hot in Ethan's chest. "That's not—" "I know it's not," Victoria interrupted, turning to face him. "Because I was there, Ethan, drunk, but present. And I know exactly what happened. You helped me when no one else would, and you did it with more respect and kindness than I probably showed you in return." She walked back to her desk but didn't sit, instead leaning against it, her posture less formal now. "My father," she said quietly. "The janitor I told you about last night. I barely remember what he looked like when he smiled. It's been so long, and I've tried so hard not to think about him, about that life. But last night, sitting in your car with those library books on the seat and the heater that didn't quite work right, I remembered." "Remembered what?" "What it felt like to be seen as a person instead of a position. My father used to say that the measure of someone's character wasn't how they treated people who could do something for them, but how they treated people who couldn't. People like him. People like—" She gestured at Ethan. "People like you." "I'm not looking for recognition," Ethan said carefully, "or special treatment. I just did what felt right." "I know, and that's exactly why what I'm about to do is complicated." Victoria returned to her chair and her CEO persona slid back into place like armor. "The investigation is over. I've already spoken to HR. You're cleared of any wrongdoing, and the allegations have been formally dismissed as baseless." Relief washed over Ethan, so intense it made his hands shake. "Thank you." Don't thank me yet, because I'm also making some other changes, and you need to understand what they mean before you accept them. She pulled a file folder from her desk drawer, opening it to reveal what looked like official documents. Effective immediately, you're being promoted to Facilities Operations Manager. It comes with an office on the 12th floor, a $20,000 salary increase, and responsibility for overseeing maintenance operations across 3 of our regional offices. Ethan stared at her, his mind unable to process the words. I'm not qualified for that position. You've worked here for 7 years. You know every floor of this building, every system, every process. You're reliable, competent, and clearly possess better judgment than half the executives currently on my payroll. You're more than qualified. That's not what I mean. Ethan leaned forward, trying to make her understand. Ms. Hale, I appreciate this, more than you know, but it looks like exactly what those people were accusing me of. Like I helped you to get something out of it. Like you're rewarding me with a promotion because you showed basic human decency when no one else would? Victoria's voice was sharp. Let them think that. Let them wonder if kindness might actually get you somewhere in this company. Maybe it'll inspire some of them to try it. Or maybe it'll make them resent me, make my life here impossible. Possibly. She met his eyes steadily. Is that a reason not to accept? Ethan thought about Lily, about the medical bills that still arrived every month, about the raise that would mean he could finally afford to get his car properly fixed, maybe even save a little for her college fund. He thought about an office instead of a janitor's closet, about respect instead of invisibility. But he also thought about the whispers that would follow him, the accusations that would intensify, the way every success would be attributed to that one night instead of his own merit. I don't want this if it's charity, he said finally, or guilt. Were you trying to make amends for something that doesn't need amending? It's not charity, Victoria said firmly. It's recognition of 7 years of excellent work that I should have acknowledged long before last night. And yes, maybe it took me being drunk and vulnerable to finally see what was right in front of me. Maybe it took you helping me to realize how many good people I've overlooked in this company, because they didn't fit the profile of what I thought leadership looked like. But that doesn't make this offer any less genuine. She slid the folder across the desk toward him. You have until Monday to decide. Think about it. Talk to your daughter. Consider whether the job is something you actually want, not just something you think you should refuse on principle. Her expression softened slightly. But Ethan, you deserve this. Not because of last night, but in spite of it. Because you've earned it through years of showing up, doing the work, being reliable and kind even when no one was watching. That matters. It should have mattered before now. Ethan's throat felt tight. He looked down at the folder, at the official Hale Industries letterhead visible through the transparent cover, at the opportunity that felt both like a dream and a trap. Can I ask you something? He said. Of course. Why does it matter so much to you? Not the promotion, I mean last night. Why did it affect you so much that people walked away? Victoria was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing patterns on the polished wood of her desk. Because I've spent 20 years building this company, building my reputation, building walls high enough that no one could see me as weak or vulnerable. And in one night, all of that fell apart. I got drunk, I got emotional, I got left alone by people I thought of as colleagues, if not friends. And the only person who stepped forward was someone I'd never even noticed before. She looked up at him. That's terrifying, Ethan. Realizing that all the power and success in the world doesn't guarantee that anyone will actually care when you fall, but it's also clarifying. It showed me what really matters. And what's that? The kind of person you are when no one's watching. The choices you make when helping costs you something. She paused. You could have walked past me last night. Probably should have from a career standpoint, but you didn't. And I need people like you in this company. People who see human beings instead of positions on an org chart. Ethan picked up the folder, feeling its weight. Inside was a future he'd never imagined. Stability, opportunity, maybe even pride in the work he did instead of shame at how invisible it made him. But it also meant accepting that everything would change, that he'd be stepping into a world where he'd always be the janitor who got promoted by the CEO, where every success would be questioned and every failure magnified. I'll think about it, he said finally. That's all I ask. Victoria stood, extending her hand across the desk. Ethan rose and took it, her grip firm and businesslike. And Ethan, regardless of what you decide about the promotion, thank you for last night, for being the kind of person my father would have been proud to know. The words settled into Ethan's chest, warm and unexpected. He nodded, not trusting himself to speak, and left her office with the folder clutched in his hands. James gave him a knowing look as he passed through reception, but said nothing. The elevator ride down felt slower than the one up, giving Ethan too much time to think, to wonder, to imagine both the possibilities and the pitfalls of accepting Victoria's offer. When he reached the lobby, his phone buzzed. A text from Lily. Mrs. Chen says you're not home yet. Everything okay? Ethan smiled despite everything and typed back, Everything's fine, Bug. Something unexpected came up. I'll explain when I get home. Love you. Love you too. Can't wait to hear about the party. The party. It felt like it had happened a lifetime ago instead of just last night. Ethan walked out into the December morning, the folder under his arm, his future suddenly uncertain in ways both thrilling and terrifying. He didn't know yet whether he'd accept the promotion, didn't know if he could navigate the politics and resentments that would come with it. But as he climbed into his beat-up Honda Civic and started the engine, Ethan realized something important. For the first time in 7 years, he had a choice. Not just about a job, but about who he wanted to be and what kind of life he wanted to build for himself and Lily. And maybe, just maybe, that was the good thing his daughter had predicted would happen. The apartment felt smaller when Ethan walked through the door, the folder from Victoria's office suddenly heavy in his hands. Mrs. Chen looked up from the small kitchen table where she was helping Lily with what looked like a math worksheet, her weathered face creasing into a smile that faded when she saw his expression. You look like you've seen a ghost, she said in her accented English, standing slowly. Her joints always gave her trouble in the morning. Everything okay? Everything's fine, Mrs. Chen. Thank you for staying with Lily. Dad! Lily launched herself from her chair, wrapping her arms around his waist. You said something came up at work. What happened? Was it about the party? Did something good happen, like I said? Ethan looked down at his daughter's eager face, at the hope shining in her eyes, and felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him. How did you explain to a 9-year-old that sometimes good things came wrapped in complications? That opportunity and risk were often the same package wearing different ribbons. Let me walk Mrs. Chen out first, okay, Bug? Then we'll talk. He guided their neighbor to the door, pressing $40 into her hand despite her protests. It was more than he usually paid, more than he could really afford, but after the morning he'd had, generosity felt necessary somehow. You sure everything's okay? Mrs. Chen asked quietly, her dark eyes searching his face. You look worried. Just tired. Long night, complicated morning. She patted his arm with maternal affection. You're a good man, Ethan Cole. Good things should happen to good men. Don't forget that. After she left, Ethan turned to find Lily watching him with the intensity only children possessed. That ability to see straight through adult deflections to the truth beneath. Sit with me, he said, settling onto their worn couch. The springs creaked in familiar protest. I need to tell you about last night, and I need your help figuring something out. Lily climbed up beside him, tucking herself against his side. Was I right? Did something good happen? Maybe. I'm not sure yet. Ethan took a breath and started from the beginning, editing as he went for age appropriateness. He told her about going to the party like she'd asked, about seeing the CEO alone and everyone else walking away, about the choice he'd made to help. Everyone else just left her there? Lily's voice was sharp with the kind of indignation only the young could muster with such purity. That's mean. They were protecting themselves. Sometimes helping someone can be complicated when there are power differences involved. That's a grown-up way of saying they were scared and mean. Ethan smiled despite himself. Maybe. But I helped her anyway, and now there are consequences. He explained about the investigation, the suspension, the morning meeting. Then he opened the folder and showed her the promotion offer. Lily's eyes went wide as she read the salary figure. Dad, that's so much money. We could get a bigger apartment, and you could get a new car, and I could… Hold on, Bug, it's not that simple. Why not? You deserve it. You work so hard. I do work hard. But this promotion, it's not just about me working hard. It's also about what happened last night. Some people are going to think I only helped Ms. Hale to get something out of it, not because it was the right thing to do. Lily frowned, processing this. At 9, she was still young enough to believe the world should be fair, but old enough to have noticed it often wasn't. But you didn't know she would give you a promotion. You just helped because she needed help. I know that, and she knows that, but other people might not believe it. They might make my life at work very difficult. They might say mean things, or treat me badly, or not trust me. So you're not going to take it. The disappointment in Lily's voice cut deeper than Ethan expected. I don't know yet. That's why I need your help figuring it out. He shifted to face her more fully. Taking this job would change a lot of things. I'd work during the day instead of at night, which means I'd be home more for dinner and bedtime. But it also means I'd have more responsibility, more stress, and I'd be learning a whole new job while people watch me and wait for me to fail. You won't fail, Lily said with absolute certainty. How do you know? Because you never give up. Even when Mom left and things got really hard, you didn't give up. You worked 2 jobs and took care of me, and you always made sure I had what I needed. Her small hand found his, and because you're the smartest person I know. Ethan's throat tightened. I'm not that smart, sweetheart. I never went to college. I barely finished high school. That school's smart. I'm talking about people smart. You always know what to do when I have a problem with my friends. You can fix anything that breaks. You notice when people are sad even when they're trying to hide it. She squeezed his hand. That's the kind of smart that matters for being a boss, right? Knowing about people? Out of the mouths of babes, Ethan thought. His daughter had just articulated something he hadn't quite been able to grasp himself, that maybe his years of invisible work, of noticing the details everyone else overlooked, of solving problems quietly and efficiently, maybe those skills were exactly what made him qualified for this position. What do you think I should do? He asked. Lily was quiet for a moment, her face serious in that way that made her look older than her years. I think you should be scared, but do it anyway. That's what you always tell me when I'm nervous about something new. This is a little different than trying out for the school play, Bug. Is it, though? You said you'd have to learn new things, and people might be mean, and you might mess up sometimes. That's exactly what trying out for the play felt like. But you told me that being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means doing the thing even when you are scared. Because the thing might be worth it. Ethan pulled his daughter close, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. When did you get so wise? I had a good teacher, she said, her voice muffled against his chest. So are you going to take it? I think so. Yeah, I think I am. The weekend passed in a blur of anxiety and preparation. Ethan researched everything he could find about facilities management, about leadership, about the systems and processes he'd be responsible for overseeing. He bought a dress shirt and slacks from a thrift store, spent an hour watching YouTube videos about how to tie a tie properly, and tried not to think about all the ways this could go catastrophically wrong. On Sunday evening, he called the number on the promotion letter and left a message accepting the position. His hands shook as he hung up, the reality of what he'd just committed to settling over him like a weight. Monday morning arrived too quickly. Ethan woke before his alarm, his stomach churning with nerves. He showered twice, trying to wash away 7 years of being invisible, of existing in the margins. The dress shirt felt stiff and uncomfortable compared to his gray uniform, and the tie took 3 attempts before he got it right. Lily insisted on taking a picture before he left, her phone held at an awkward angle that captured mostly ceiling but also his nervous smile. You look so handsome, Dad, like a real businessman. I am a real businessman now, I guess. No, you were always real. Now you just look like it too. He arrived at Hale Industries 45 minutes early, too anxious to wait at home any longer. The building felt different walking in through the main entrance instead of the service door, wearing slacks instead of his gray uniform. The security guard who'd waved him past countless times did a double take before checking his ID. Cole? Ethan Cole? The guard's eyebrows rose. I heard you got promoted. Congratulations, man. Thanks. Ethan tried to read the guard's tone, searching for sarcasm or resentment, but found only genuine warmth. About time they recognized good work around here. You've been keeping this place running for years. The words eased something tight in Ethan's chest. Maybe not everyone would resent his promotion. Maybe some people understood that kindness and competence could coexist. James Mitchell was waiting when Ethan stepped off the elevator on the 12th floor, his professional smile firmly in place. "Mr. Cole, welcome to your first day. I'll show you to your office." The office was modest compared to Victoria's sprawling space, but to Ethan it might as well have been a palace. A real desk, not a folding table in a supply closet. A window with an actual view of the city. A computer, a phone, a nameplate that read, "Ethan Cole, Facilities Operations Manager." "Ms. Hale has scheduled an onboarding meeting with you at 10, James said, handing him a folder. "This contains your access credentials, building systems manual, contact list for your regional teams, and an overview of current projects requiring immediate attention. Your team leads will be here at 9 for introductions." "Team leads?" Ethan echoed faintly. "You'll be managing 12 people directly, with an additional 38 staff members across the regional offices reporting through those leads. It's outlined in the organizational chart on page 4. 50 people. Ethan would be responsible for 50 people's work, their schedules, their performance reviews. The enormity of it hit him like a wave, and he had to sit down in his new chair before his knees gave out. James's expression softened slightly. "It's overwhelming at first, I know. But Ms. Hale wouldn't have promoted you if she didn't believe you could handle it. And you'll have support. I'm available if you need anything, and Margaret Chen from HR will be checking in regularly during your transition period." After James left, Ethan sat alone in his office, trying to absorb the reality of his new position. Through the window, he could see the city spreading out below, all those buildings full of people living their lives, making their choices, navigating their own complicated paths. Somewhere out there, Lily was sitting in her classroom, probably telling anyone who would listen that her dad had gotten a promotion. At 8:55, there was a knock on his door frame. Ethan looked up to find 3 people standing there, their expressions carefully neutral. 2 men and a woman, all probably in their 40s or 50s, all wearing variations of business casual that suggested they'd been in the facilities department for years. "Mr. Cole?" The woman spoke first, her tone professionally polite but cool. "I'm Sandra Morrison, lead for the North Region. This is Tom Bradley and Kevin Foster. We're your team leads. Please, come in, and call me Ethan." He stood, trying to project confidence he didn't feel. "I know this transition is probably as unexpected for you as it is for me." "That's one way to put it," Tom said, his arms crossed over his broad chest. "Another way would be to say that we've been working in facilities management for a combined 60 years, and we just found out we're reporting to someone who was emptying our trash cans last week." The bluntness of it stung, but Ethan forced himself to meet Tom's eyes steadily. "You're right, I was. And I know how the systems work because I've been using them for 7 years. I know which contractors cut corners and which ones do quality work. I know that the HVAC system on floors 8 through 11 needs replacing, not just repairs, and that we're wasting thousands every month trying to patch it. I know that the cleaning supplies we're ordering from Midwest Industrial are marked up 40% over what we could get from Regional Supply Co. I know these things because I've been paying attention, not because I have an MBA. Sandra's eyebrows rose slightly. "You've been tracking the HVAC efficiency?" "I've been tracking everything. Systems fail when people stop noticing the details." Ethan gestured to the chairs in his office. "Look, I'm not going to pretend I know everything you know. You have experience and expertise I don't have, but I'm also not going to apologize for the opportunity I've been given. I can either spend my energy defending my presence here, or I can spend it learning from you and doing this job well. I'd prefer the latter, but that requires you giving me a chance." The 3 team leads exchanged glances, some silent communication passing between them. Finally, Kevin spoke, his voice less hostile than Tom's had been. "You really track the HVAC data?" "I have spreadsheets, 7 years' worth, energy costs, repair frequency, temperature complaints by floor and season. I was going to put together a proposal, but..." He trailed off, shrugging. "Janitors don't make capital expenditure recommendations." "Can we see the data?" Sandra asked. Ethan pulled out his phone, navigating to his cloud storage where he'd kept detailed records of everything he'd noticed during his night shifts. Problems, patterns, inefficiencies, solutions he'd thought about but never had the authority to implement. He handed the phone to Sandra, watching as she scrolled through months of observations. "This is incredibly detailed," she said quietly, "and accurate. We've been fighting with management about that HVAC system for 2 years." "So fight harder," Ethan said. "Now you have data to back up your recommendations." Tom's posture relaxed slightly. "You really think you can get approval for a full replacement? The Capital Committee has shot us down 3 times. I think I have the CEO's attention in a way you probably haven't had. And I think if we present this right, showing the long-term cost savings and efficiency gains, we can make the case." Ethan leaned forward. "But I can't do it alone. I need your experience, your institutional knowledge, your relationships with the contractors and vendors. I need you to teach me how to be effective in this role." Sandra studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right, we'll give you a chance, but understand that there's going to be a lot of resistance from other departments. People who think you got this position through favoritism rather than merit." "I know. And some of that resistance is going to come from within our own department," Kevin added. "We have technicians who've been here 15, 20 years. They're not going to be happy taking direction from someone who was their peer last week." "I understand. All I can do is show up, work hard, and prove I deserve to be here. Same thing I've been doing for 7 years. Ethan met each of their eyes in turn. "I'm not asking for automatic respect. I'm asking for the opportunity to earn it." The next few hours passed in a whirlwind of information. Sandra, Tom, and Kevin walked him through current projects, pending issues, personnel matters that needed attention. Ethan took notes furiously, his head spinning with details about maintenance contracts and staffing schedules and budget variances. At 10 o'clock, James appeared to escort him to Victoria's office. The team leads exchanged knowing looks as Ethan left, and he wondered what rumors were already circulating about his relationship with the CEO. Victoria was on a phone call when he arrived, gesturing for him to sit while she finished discussing quarterly projections with someone who clearly wasn't giving her the answers she wanted. Watching her work was like watching a masterclass in controlled authority. Every word precise, every pause strategic, her displeasure evident without her ever raising her voice. When she hung up, she turned to Ethan with a slight smile. "How's your first morning going?" "Overwhelming. Informative. Slightly terrifying." "Good. If you weren't terrified, I'd be worried about your judgment." She pulled out a file. "I wanted to check in personally, see how you're settling in. Have you met your team leads?" "Yes, they're understandably skeptical, but I think we reached an understanding." "Which is?" "That I have a lot to learn, but I'm willing to learn it. And that I have insights from 7 years of seeing how things actually work versus how they're supposed to work on paper." Victoria nodded approvingly. "Smart. Use your unique perspective as an asset, not a liability." She paused. "You're going to face resistance, Ethan, from people who think I promoted you because of what happened at the party, from people who resent that you skipped several levels on the organizational chart, from people who just don't like change. How do you plan to handle that?" "By doing excellent work, by being transparent about what I know and what I'm learning, by listening more than I talk and proving myself through results rather than words." He met her eyes. "And by not pretending to be something I'm not. I'm not going to suddenly start acting like I have an MBA or years of management experience. But I know this building, I know these systems, and I care about the people who work here. That has to count for something." "It counts for everything," Victoria said quietly. "I've watched too many people rise in this company based on credentials and connections rather than competence and character. I'm betting that the reverse can also be true, that competence and character can overcome lack of credentials." Her expression turned serious. "But I need you to understand something. I can open doors for you, but I can't walk through them for you. This opportunity is real, but so are the challenges. If you fail, if you can't handle the work or the politics or the pressure, I can't protect you just because you helped me one night." "I wouldn't want you to," Ethan said. "I need this to be about the work, not about that night. Otherwise, I'll never know if I actually earned my place here." "Good." Victoria stood, extending her hand. "Then let's make sure you earn it. I'll be watching, Ethan. Not because I doubt you, but because I'm invested in your success." Don't make me regret that investment. The handshake felt like sealing a contract, one written in opportunity and risk in equal measure. As Ethan left her office and returned to his own, he felt the weight of expectation settling onto his shoulders like a physical thing. The afternoon brought more meetings, more introductions, more moments where he saw doubt flicker across people's faces when they realized who he was and how he'd gotten here. By 5 o'clock, Ethan's head was pounding, and his notes had filled 20 pages of his new notebook. He was packing up to leave when Marcus appeared in his doorway. His former supervisor looked uncomfortable, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. "Got a minute?" Marcus asked. "Of course. Come in." Marcus sat heavily in one of the visitor chairs, his eyes scanning the office. "Nice setup. Big step up from a janitor's closet." "It is." "Look, I need to say something, and I'm not great at this kind of thing, so just let me get it out, okay?" Marcus took a breath. "I was wrong. About what I said to you on Friday. About staying in your lane, about the consequences. I was trying to protect you, but I was also protecting the system, the hierarchy, the way things have always been done." "You were doing your job," Ethan said carefully. "My job should have been defending you, not defending the people who were ready to throw you under the bus for showing basic human decency." Marcus leaned forward, his expression earnest. "I've worked in facilities for 28 years, Ethan. Started as a janitor myself, worked my way up to supervisor. And you know what I learned? That good work is invisible until something breaks. That people like us, we keep everything running, but we're only noticed when things go wrong. And I accepted that. I told myself that's just how it is, that we're the infrastructure everyone takes for granted. It doesn't have to be that way." "No, it doesn't. And watching you this past week, seeing you refuse to accept that invisibility, seeing you get promoted and step into a role most people would say you're not qualified for, it reminded me that I used to believe things could be different too." Marcus smiled sadly. "I'm proud of you, kid. And I'm sorry I didn't have your back when it mattered." Ethan felt emotion clog his throat. "You did have my back, Marcus. You've been a good supervisor for 7 years. You taught me how to do this job right, how to take pride in the work even when no one noticed. That matters." "Maybe. But I also taught you to keep your head down and stay invisible. And you're proving that was the wrong lesson." Marcus stood, extending his hand. "For what it's worth, I think you're going to do great in this role. You see things other people miss. You care about the work and the people doing it, and you're not afraid to make the hard calls when you need to." They shook hands, and Marcus left, but the conversation stayed with Ethan as he gathered his things and headed home. How many other people in this building had learned to make themselves invisible, to accept that good work would go unrecognized, to stay in their assigned lanes no matter how much they had to offer? Lily was waiting by the window when he pulled up, her face pressed against the glass. She threw open the apartment door before he could even reach it, launching herself into his arms with enough force to nearly knock him over. "How was it? Tell me everything. Were people nice? Did you have your own office? Did anyone say congratulations?" Ethan laughed, carrying her inside. "It was overwhelming and scary and exciting all at once. Yes, I have my own office with a window. Some people were nice, some people were skeptical, and a few people said congratulations. I told everyone at school that my dad got promoted to be a manager. Madison didn't believe me at first because she said janitors don't become managers, but then I showed her the picture I took and she said, 'You looked very professional.' Madison was right to be skeptical. It doesn't happen very often. But it happened to you because you deserved it," Lily said firmly. "Are you happy? Do you like the new job?" Ethan thought about the question. Was he happy? He was terrified, certainly, overwhelmed, absolutely, but underneath the anxiety was something else, a sense of possibility, of doors opening, of his life expanding beyond the narrow confines he'd accepted as permanent. "I think so, Bug. Ask me again in a few months when I actually know what I'm doing." "You'll figure it out. You always do." Her absolute faith in him was both inspiring and humbling. Ethan pulled her close, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo, feeling the solid weight of her in his arms. This was why he'd taken the risk, why he'd accepted the promotion despite all the complications it would bring. Because Lily deserved a father who reached for opportunities instead of settling for invisibility. Because she needed to see that hard work and kindness could actually lead somewhere, that the world her 9-year-old heart believed in might actually be real. That night, after Lily was asleep, Ethan sat at their small kitchen table with his notebook, reviewing everything he'd learned during his first day. The challenges ahead were enormous: systems to master, relationships to build, skeptics to win over, a steep learning curve that would require every ounce of focus and determination he possessed. But as he looked around their modest apartment, at the life he'd built from nothing after his wife left, at the daughter sleeping peacefully in the next room who believed he could do anything, Ethan felt something unexpected. He felt ready. Ready to stop being invisible, ready to prove that kindness and competence weren't weaknesses but strengths, ready to show everyone who doubted him, including himself, that sometimes the people who keep the world running from the shadows deserve a chance to lead from the light. The folder from Victoria's office sat on the table beside his notebook, official and imposing. But next to it was a drawing Lily had made that afternoon, stick figures labeled Dad and Me, standing in front of a building with Hale Industries written across the top in crayon. In the drawing, both stick figures were smiling. Ethan decided to believe that was prophetic, because if his daughter could have faith in him, then maybe, just maybe, he could have faith in himself too. The prophetic quality of Lily's drawing lasted exactly 3 days. On Thursday morning, Ethan arrived at his office to find an envelope on his desk, plain white with no return address. Inside was a single printed page, the kind of anonymous corporate cruelty that flourished in buildings like this one. The message was brief and brutal. Everyone knows you slept your way into this job. How does it feel to prostitute yourself for a promotion? Enjoy it while it lasts. Ethan's hands trembled as he read it, a cold fury rising in his chest. He'd expected resistance, anticipated skepticism, prepared himself for professional doubts about his qualifications. But this was different. This was personal, vicious, designed to wound rather than question. He was still staring at the letter when Sandra knocked on his doorframe, her expression darkening when she saw what he was holding. "Let me guess," she said. "Anonymous hate mail? You've seen these before. Tom got one last year when he recommended his nephew for an internship. Someone accused him of nepotism, said some pretty ugly things." Sandra crossed her arms. "Welcome to office politics. When people can't attack your work, they attack your character." "Should I report it to HR?" "You could. They'll file it, investigate, probably never find who sent it. Meanwhile, word spreads that you're tattling to HR on your 4th day, and it makes you look weak." She paused. "Or you could shred it and prove you're tougher than whoever sent it." Ethan looked at the letter again, at the words designed to make him feel dirty for accepting an opportunity he'd earned. Then he fed it into his desk shredder, watching the paper turn to ribbons. "Noted," he said. "Anything else I should know about surviving here?" Sandra's expression softened slightly. "Don't eat lunch alone. Sounds stupid, but visibility matters. People need to see you're part of the team, not isolated in your office. And don't let anyone catch you looking uncertain, even when you are. Project confidence until it becomes real." The advice was sound, but following it proved harder than Ethan anticipated. The cafeteria at lunchtime was a minefield of unspoken social hierarchies. Executives clustered at certain tables, middle management at others, support staff in their own section. Ethan's promotion had left him in a strange limbo, too senior to sit with his former janitorial colleagues, too junior and too recent to be welcomed by the established managers. He settled at a table alone, reviewing his notes on the HVAC's proposal, when a voice interrupted his thoughts. "This seat taken?" Ethan looked up to find a woman in her 30s holding a salad, her smile cautiously friendly. She wore a badge identifying her as Rachel Kim from marketing. "No, please," Ethan said, gesturing to the empty chair. Rachel sat, and within moments 2 others joined them, Daniel from IT and Jennifer from accounting. Ethan braced himself for suspicion or judgment, but instead they started talking about a facilities request that had been pending for weeks. "The heating in our section hasn't worked right in months," Jennifer said. "We've submitted 3 tickets, but nothing ever gets fixed." "Which floor?" Ethan asked, already pulling out his phone to make a note. 6th, northeast corner. "That's zone 3 on the climate control system. There's a damper issue we've been trying to address, but the parts have been back-ordered." He made a note to follow up with Sandra about expediting the order. "I'll look into it this afternoon." Rachel's eyebrows rose. You actually know the zone numbers? I spent 7 years learning every system in this building. The knowledge doesn't disappear just because my title changed. So the rumors are true, Daniel said, his tone curious rather than hostile. You really were a janitor here before? Night shift maintenance, yes. And Victoria Hale actually promoted you because you helped her at the holiday party. Here it was, the question everyone wanted to ask, but most people danced around. Ethan set down his fork and met Daniel's eyes directly. Ms. Hale promoted me because I've worked here for 7 years and know these systems better than most people realize. The holiday party was when she finally noticed that, but it wasn't why I'm qualified for this job. I'm qualified because I've been doing facilities work since before some of the managers here even started at this company. But you don't have a degree, Jennifer said. How did you get past HR requirements? Ms. Hale waved them. She decided experience and demonstrated competence mattered more than credentials. Ethan kept his voice level, professional. I understand that's unusual. I also understand some people think I don't deserve this position. All I can do is prove myself through my work. Rachel was quiet for a moment, then nodded. Fair enough. For what it's worth, I hope you do prove yourself. This company could use some new perspectives in leadership. The conversation shifted to safer topics after that, but Ethan left lunch feeling both encouraged and exhausted. Every interaction was a test, every question a potential trap. He was hyper-aware of how he spoke, how he carried himself, whether his clothes were appropriate, if his vocabulary marked him as educated enough or too working class. It was exhausting in ways his night shift had never been. The afternoon brought a budget review meeting with department heads, Ethan's first exposure to the executive-level politics he'd only observed from a distance before. He sat at a conference table surrounded by people with impressive titles and expensive suits, acutely aware of his thrift store shirt and the nervous sweat dampening his collar. The CFO, a sharp-featured man named Robert Chen, clicked through spreadsheets with barely concealed irritation. Facilities is requesting a $2.3 million capital expenditure for HVAC replacement. That's significantly above your normal maintenance budget. Yes, sir, Ethan said, trying to keep his voice steady. But if you look at the cost analysis, I'm looking at the fact that your department has consistently come in under budget for equipment replacement the past 3 years. Now suddenly you need millions? Explain the discrepancy. Ethan pulled up the spreadsheet he'd prepared, the 7 years of data he'd collected during his night shifts. The previous strategy was to repair rather than replace, which kept annual costs low. But that approach has resulted in declining efficiency and increasing emergency repair frequency. This graph shows energy costs for floors. 8 through 11 have risen 37% over 4 years, directly correlated with HVAC system degradation. Energy costs rise every year. That doesn't justify— Not at this rate, they don't, Ethan interrupted, then immediately regretted it when Chen's eyes narrowed. I apologize. What I mean is, the rate of increase is abnormal and directly traceable to equipment failure. Additionally, we've had 14 emergency repair calls in the past 18 months, each costing between $8,000 and $12,000. That's over $150,000 in reactive spending that could have been avoided with proactive replacement. Where did you get this data? The question came from another executive, a woman Ethan recognized as the VP of Operations. I tracked it. Every night for 7 years, I documented system performance, noted temperature complaints, recorded repair calls and costs. I saw patterns that weren't visible in quarterly reports because I was here when things broke, when employees complained, when contractors made promises they didn't keep. The room went quiet. Chen leaned back in his chair, reassessing Ethan with an expression that might have been respect or might have been calculation. You collected 7 years of operational data on your own initiative without being asked while working as a janitor? Yes, sir. I noticed things needed fixing, but I didn't have the authority to fix them. So I documented everything, thinking maybe someday the information would be useful. And now you have the authority, Chen said slowly. Interesting timing. The implication was clear, that Ethan had manufactured this data to justify his new position, to prove he deserved the promotion. Anger flared hot in his chest, but before he could respond, another voice cut through the tension. "Robert, I reviewed Ethan's data myself last week. It's meticulous, accurate, and frankly embarrassing that we didn't have this level of operational visibility before now." Ethan turned to see Victoria standing in the doorway, her presence commanding immediate attention. She hadn't been scheduled for this meeting, but clearly she'd decided to attend anyway. "The real question," Victoria continued, moving to the head of the table, "isn't why facilities is requesting this expenditure now. It's why we ignored the problem for years because the person who noticed it didn't have the right title to be taken seriously." Chen's jaw tightened. "With all due respect, Victoria, we can't approve every capital request just because what? Because the person making the request used to clean our offices?" Victoria's voice was sharp enough to cut. "The data supports the expenditure. The cost analysis shows ROI within 18 months. Either challenge the numbers on their merits or approve the request, but don't dismiss it because you're uncomfortable with who's presenting it." The silence that followed was arctic. Ethan wanted to disappear through the floor, wanted to be anywhere but in the middle of this power play. He'd wanted to prove himself on his own merit, not have Victoria swoop in to defend him like he couldn't handle professional scrutiny. "The numbers are sound," the VP of Operations said finally. "I move to approve the expenditure." "Seconded," another executive added quickly. Chen looked like he wanted to argue further, but recognized a losing battle. "Fine. Approved. But I expect quarterly progress reports and strict adherence to the projected timeline." "You'll have them," Ethan said, his voice steadier than he felt. The meeting adjourned shortly after, executives filing out with barely concealed whispers. Ethan gathered his materials slowly, waiting until the room emptied before approaching Victoria. "I didn't need you to rescue me in there," he said quietly. Victoria's expression was unreadable. "That wasn't a rescue. That was a correction. Chen was about to dismiss a solid proposal based on bias, and I don't tolerate that in my organization. But now everyone thinks I can't defend myself, that I'm just your pet project who runs to you whenever someone questions me. Then prove them wrong. Deliver on this project flawlessly. Show them the data was accurate, the projections were conservative, and the results exceed expectations." Victoria's voice softened slightly. "I know you want to do this entirely on your own, Ethan, but leadership doesn't happen in isolation. Sometimes using your resources, including your relationship with the CEO, is smart strategy rather than weakness." "It doesn't feel smart. It feels like confirming every suspicion people have about why I got this job." "People are going to have those suspicions regardless of what you do. You could be perfect in this role, and someone would still claim you didn't earn it." She paused. "The question is whether you're going to let their doubts control your actions or whether you're going to focus on the work and let the results speak for themselves." Ethan wanted to argue, wanted to explain that her intervention made everything harder. But the truth was more complicated. She wasn't wrong about Chen's bias, wasn't wrong about the data supporting the proposal. His pride wanted to handle everything himself, but maybe that was ego talking rather than strategy. "I'll deliver on the project," he said finally, "flawlessly." "I know you will." As Victoria left, Ethan sank back into his chair, the weight of the day pressing down on him. His phone buzzed with a text from Sandra. "Heard about the budget meeting. Welcome to the big leagues. You survived. That's what matters." Survived. That's what his professional life had become. A series of small survivals, each day another test of whether he belonged in this world he'd never been meant to inhabit. The next 2 weeks blurred together in a cascade of challenges that tested every skill Ethan possessed. The HVAC project moved forward, but coordinating contractors, managing timelines, and keeping disruption minimal while replacing major equipment required juggling more variables than he'd anticipated. He worked 12-hour days, arrived before dawn, and left after dark, trying to prove he could handle the responsibility he'd been given. Lily saw less of him now than when he'd worked nights. At least then he'd been home for dinner, helped with homework, tucked her in before leaving for his shift. Now he grabbed breakfast with her if he was lucky, texted her throughout the day, and often arrived home after she was already asleep. Mrs. Chen picked up the slack, but Ethan saw the way Lily's excitement about his promotion had dimmed, replaced by quiet resignation to his absence. "I thought the new job meant you'd be home more," Lily said one Saturday morning, her voice small over a breakfast he'd finally had time to make. I know, Bug. I'm sorry. It's just temporary, while I'm getting everything set up. Once the HVAC project is finished and I have systems in place, I'll have more regular hours. That's what you said last week. The accusation, delivered with 9-year-old directness, hit harder than any anonymous letter or skeptical executive. You're right. I did say that, and I was wrong. The job is taking more time than I expected. Do you like it? The new job? Lily pushed her pancakes around her plate. You seem tired all the time now, and worried. I am tired and worried, but I also feel like I'm doing something that matters, something more than just cleaning up after other people. He reached across the table to take her hand. I'm sorry I haven't been around as much. That wasn't supposed to be part of this deal. Madison's dad changed jobs last year, and he says all new jobs are hard at first, but they get easier. Madison's dad is very smart. He's an accountant. You're a manager. That's probably harder. Ethan smiled despite his exhaustion. Definitely harder. How did you get so wise? I read a lot, Lily said matter-of-factly. Books teach you things. The weekend provided a brief respite, time to catch up on sleep and spend actual hours with his daughter. They went to the library, walked through the park despite the December cold, made hot chocolate, and watched movies on their small TV. For 2 days, Ethan could pretend his life was simple again, that the pressures of his new position didn't exist beyond Monday morning. But Monday arrived with crushing inevitability, bringing a crisis that would test everything Ethan had learned. He was reviewing contractor schedules when Tom burst into his office, his face pale. We have a problem. Building C, the regional office in Denver. Their boiler just failed. Complete breakdown. It's 15 degrees outside and 300 people have no heat. Ethan's stomach dropped. Building C was his responsibility, one of the regional offices he was supposed to be managing despite never having visited it. What's the timeline for repair? The contractor says they can't get parts for at least 3 days, maybe 4. And that's assuming the parts are still manufactured. The boiler's old, might be discontinued. Can we bring in temporary heaters? Not enough to heat a building that size. We're talking about having to close the office, send everyone home, lose 3 or 4 days of productivity across multiple departments. Tom's expression was grim. This is going to cost hundreds of thousands in lost work, maybe more. And it's going to land on you. Why me? The boiler was maintained before I took this position. Because you're the facilities operations manager now. When things break, it's your responsibility. Fair or not, that's the job. Ethan's mind raced, trying to think through options. Get me the maintenance records for that boiler. Every service call, every inspection, everything. And find me the contractor's contact information. I need to talk to them directly. Ethan, I'm telling you, there's no quick fix for this. Sometimes equipment just fails. And sometimes equipment fails because it wasn't maintained properly or because someone ignored warning signs. Ethan was already pulling up building schematics on his computer. I need those records now. Tom left, returning 20 minutes later with a file that should have been thicker than it was. Ethan flipped through inspection reports, his jaw tightening with each page. The boiler had been flagged 6 months ago for potential issues, recommended for detailed inspection and possible replacement. The recommendation had been filed and apparently forgotten. Who was the facilities manager when this recommendation came through? Ethan asked. That would have been Jim Patterson. He retired 3 months ago. And no one followed up on his open items? Tom shifted uncomfortably. There was a gap between Jim retiring and you being hired. Things fell through the cracks. A $300,000 crack. Ethan grabbed his phone and called the contractor, a company called Mountain States Mechanical. The owner, a gruff-voiced man named Carl, confirmed that parts for the old boiler were indeed hard to find. But, Carl added, I've got a refurbished unit sitting in my warehouse, pulled it from a demolition job last month, tested it thoroughly. It's actually newer and more efficient than what you've got. I could have it installed in 2 days if you're willing to pay for the rush job. How much? Carl quoted a figure that made Ethan wince but was still less than the cost of closing the building. Do it. I'll have the authorization to you within the hour. You sure? That's a lot of money to commit without running it up the chain. I am the chain now, Ethan said, hoping it was true. Get your team mobilized. I want that building heated by Wednesday morning." After hanging up, Ethan pulled up the authorization forms, his hands hovering over the keyboard. This was exactly the kind of decision that could make or break his credibility. If the refurbished boiler failed, if Carl's company didn't deliver, if the costs exceeded projections, he'd be finished. But if he delayed to get approval, if he let bureaucracy slow down a solution, 300 people would be sent home, and his inability to handle a crisis would be equally damning. He typed in the authorization code Victoria had given him, the one that allowed him to approve emergency expenditures up to a certain threshold. The system accepted it, and just like that, Ethan had committed the company to a 6-figure emergency repair based on nothing but his judgment and a contractor's word. Sandra appeared in his doorway as he was documenting the decision. "Heard about Denver. Bold move, authorizing the repair without escalating." "Bold or stupid? Depends on whether it works." She sat down, her expression serious. "You know this is a test, right? Someone probably knew that boiler was going to fail soon. Could be coincidence, could be that Patterson left it as a ticking time bomb, could be someone actively sabotaging you." "Why would anyone sabotage me?" "Because you're a threat. You represent change, disruption to the established order. Some people don't want to see you succeed because your success means they've been doing things wrong for years." "Oh," Sandra leaned forward. "I'm not saying that's definitely what's happening, but in this building, you should always assume someone's testing you and act accordingly." The words stayed with Ethan as he coordinated the Denver repair, fielding calls from anxious department heads, updating Victoria's office on the situation, and trying to project confidence he was far from feeling. By Tuesday afternoon, Carl's team had the new boiler partially installed. By Wednesday morning, heat was flowing through Building C again, and Ethan received a terse email from Robert Chen. "Crisis managed adequately. See that it doesn't happen again." Adequately. Not well, not excellently. Adequately. As if preventing a catastrophic shutdown was merely meeting minimum expectations. Ethan was drafting a response when his office phone rang. Victoria's assistant, asking if he could come to her office immediately. The summons felt ominous. Ethan took the elevator up to 23, trying to prepare himself for whatever was coming. Had he overstepped with the Denver authorization? Was Chen pushing back? Had someone complained about his handling of the crisis? Victoria was standing at her window when he entered, her back to the door. "Close it," she said without turning. Ethan obeyed, his stomach churning. "I received an interesting call this morning," Victoria said, finally facing him. "From the HR director. Apparently there's been a complaint filed against you." "A complaint? For what?" "Inappropriate workplace behavior. The complainant is anonymous, but they claim you've been making female employees uncomfortable with unwanted attention, specifically citing instances in the cafeteria and at department meetings." Ethan felt like he'd been punched. "That's not true. I've been nothing but professional with everyone." "I know that. I reviewed the complaint and it's clearly fabricated. The instances cited are either vague to the point of meaninglessness or can be disproven by security footage." Victoria's expression was hard. "This is retaliation for Denver. Someone is trying to undermine you, and they're using the most damaging accusations possible to do it." "What happens now?" "HR has to investigate. It's policy. You'll be interviewed. Anyone mentioned in the complaint will be interviewed, and the process will take at least 2 weeks. During that time, you'll remain in your position, but the complaint will be in your file." "So even though it's false, it still damages my reputation." "Yes, that's the point. Welcome to corporate warfare, Ethan. When people can't beat you on merit, they attack your character." Victoria's voice softened. "I'm sorry. I knew you'd face resistance, but I didn't anticipate it would get this vicious this quickly." "You think it's someone in my department? Someone who resents the promotion?" "Possibly. Or someone in another department who doesn't like that I promoted you over their preferred candidate. Or someone who simply enjoys chaos." She paused. "The question is how you respond. You can let this make you paranoid and defensive, or you can keep doing excellent work and trust that the truth will prevail. That's a lot of trust to put in a system that's already failed me multiple times." "It is," Victoria agreed, "but it's also the only path forward that doesn't destroy who you are. If you let this make you bitter and suspicious, if you start seeing enemies everywhere, then they win, even if the complaint is dismissed. Ethan wanted to argue, wanted to rage against the unfairness of being forced to defend himself against lies while simultaneously proving he deserved a position he'd already earned. But underneath the anger was exhaustion, bone-deep weariness at the constant battles, the endless tests, the reality that success for someone like him required perfection while others could fail upward without consequence. "I need to go home," he said quietly. "I need to see my daughter and remember why I'm doing this." Victoria nodded. "Take the rest of the day. And Ethan, don't let them break you. You're stronger than they think." Ethan left her office, rode the elevator down in a daze, and drove home in the middle of the afternoon for the first time since starting his new position. Lily was shocked to see him walk through the door while she was doing homework at the kitchen table. "Dad, what's wrong? Did something happen?" "Nothing's wrong, Bug. I just decided I needed to be home." He sat beside her, pulling her close. "Tell me about your day. Tell me what you're learning in school. Tell me about anything that has nothing to do with work or offices or corporate politics." Lily talked and Ethan listened, letting her 9-year-old worldview wash over him like a balm. She told him about a science project on weather patterns, about the boy in her class who claimed he could burp the alphabet, about the book she was reading where a girl discovers she has magical powers she never knew existed. "Do you think that's real?" Lily asked. "Having powers you don't know about until you need them." "I think everyone has strengths they don't recognize until they're tested," Ethan said. "Sometimes you don't know what you're capable of until you have to do something you never thought possible." "Like you becoming a manager?" "Like me becoming a manager." "Are you good at it, the managing?" The question deserved honesty. "I'm learning. Some days I think I'm doing okay. Other days I feel completely lost. But I'm trying my best, and I'm not giving up, and I'm hoping that's enough." Lily studied him with that unsettling perception children sometimes possessed. "Someone's being mean to you at work, aren't they?" "What makes you say that?" "Because you look the way I did when Madison's friends said I was weird for reading all the time. Like you're trying to prove something to people who already decided they don't like you." Out of the mouths of babes, Ethan thought for the second time in as many weeks. His daughter had just articulated exactly what he'd been feeling but couldn't quite name. "You're right," he admitted. "Some people at work have decided they don't like me, and they're being mean about it. But you know what you told me when Madison's friends were being difficult? That their opinion doesn't change who I am?" "Exactly, and the same is true for me. People can doubt me, can say mean things, can try to make my job harder. But none of that changes who I am or whether I'm actually good at this work. I just have to keep proving it, one day at a time. And if they still don't believe you, then I'll have done my best, and I'll know I earned my place, and their belief becomes their problem, not mine." Lily nodded solemnly, then hugged him tight. "I believe in you, Dad. Even if no one else does, I do." The simple declaration cracked something open in Ethan's chest. All the stress of the past weeks, all the doubts and fears and exhaustion came pouring out in a way he hadn't allowed himself since accepting the promotion. Lily held him while he composed himself, her small arms surprisingly strong. "It's okay to be sad sometimes," she whispered. "You tell me that all the time." "I do, don't I?" "And you tell me that being sad doesn't mean giving up. It just means the thing is hard, but hard things can still be worth doing." Ethan laughed wetly, pulling back to look at his daughter. "When did you get so smart?" "I had a good teacher," she said, echoing words he'd once said to her. "And Dad, even if this job is really hard, even if people are mean, I'm glad you took it, because now you get to be home some afternoons like this, and that's better than you being gone all night, every night." It was such a simple thing, but Lily was right. Despite everything, despite the stress and the false accusations and the constant feeling of being under siege, there were small victories. Afternoons like this. The ability to help Lily with homework in daylight instead of reviewing it bleary-eyed after a night shift. The chance to prove that people like them could rise beyond the limitations others tried to impose. That night, after Lily was asleep, Ethan sat at the kitchen table and drafted a detailed response to the HR complaint. He outlined his interactions with every employee mentioned, provided timestamps and witnesses, and offered to submit to any investigation necessary to clear his name. He didn't express anger or defensiveness, simply presented facts with the same meticulous attention to detail He'd brought to tracking HVAC data for 7 years. If someone was trying to break him, trying to force him back into invisibility, they'd underestimated how much he'd already survived. He'd built a life from nothing after his wife left. He'd raised a daughter alone while working nights and stretching every dollar. He'd maintained dignity and competence in a job that most people dismissed as beneath notice. A false HR complaint was just another obstacle, another test of whether he belonged in a world that had never wanted people like him in the first place. And Ethan was done apologizing for taking up space in that world. He was done being invisible, done accepting that good work should go unrecognized, done believing that kindness was a liability rather than a strength. Tomorrow, he'd go back to the office and face whatever came next. He'd manage the HVAC project, respond to the investigation, and prove that his promotion was earned through merit, not favoritism. Because his daughter believed in him. And that, Ethan decided, was worth more than all the anonymous letters and false accusations and corporate politics combined. The conviction Ethan felt at his kitchen table lasted until he walked into Hale Industries the next morning and saw the way conversations stopped when he passed. The whispers had always been there, lurking at the edges of his new reality, but now they were blatant, undisguised. People didn't even bother pretending they weren't talking about him. He made it to his office and closed the door, leaning against it for a moment to gather himself. His phone buzzed almost immediately with a text from Sandra. Conference room B, 9 a.m., emergency team meeting. HR will be there. The meeting was exactly as uncomfortable as Ethan anticipated. Margaret Chen from HR sat at the head of the table, her expression professionally neutral as she explained the investigation process. His 3 team leads were present, along with 2 other department managers Ethan barely knew. Everyone avoided making direct eye contact except Tom, who looked genuinely angry on Ethan's behalf. The complaint alleges a pattern of behavior over the past 3 weeks, Margaret said, reading from her notes. Specifically, unwanted attention directed at female employees during lunch periods and in departmental meetings. Mr. Cole, you'll have an opportunity to respond to each allegation individually, but I want to be clear that this is a serious matter. We take all harassment complaints seriously, regardless of the complainant's identity. I understand, Ethan said, keeping his voice level. And I welcome a thorough investigation because these allegations are completely false. That will be determined through the process. In the meantime, I need to ask if anyone in this room has witnessed behavior from Mr. Cole that could be construed as inappropriate. The silence stretched out, uncomfortable and heavy. Finally, Kevin spoke up. I've worked with Ethan almost every day since his promotion. I've seen him interact with dozens of employees, male and female. He's been nothing but professional. Frankly, he's been so focused on learning the job that I doubt he's had time or energy to harass anyone, even if he were inclined to, which I don't believe he is. I can confirm that, Sandra added. I've been in multiple meetings where women were present. Ethan's behavior has been appropriate. If anything, he's been overly cautious about maintaining professional boundaries. Margaret made notes, her pen scratching across paper. And what about the cafeteria incidents mentioned in the complaint? Allegedly approaching female employees during lunch and making them uncomfortable with personal questions? Tom laughed, a short, bitter sound. I've had lunch with Ethan twice. Both times other people approached him, not the other way around. And the questions he asked were things like, which floor are you on and how can I help with your facilities issues? Real threatening stuff. Sarcasm isn't helpful, Mr. Bradley. Neither are anonymous complaints designed to destroy someone's career, Tom shot back. We all know this is retaliation. The question is whether HR is going to do their due diligence or just accept accusations at face value because it's easier than admitting someone's weaponizing the system. Margaret's expression tightened. I assure you, this investigation will be thorough and fair. Mr. Cole, I'll need you to provide a detailed account of your interactions with all employees over the past month, including dates, times, and witnesses when possible. I'll also be interviewing the individuals mentioned in the complaint to get their perspective. When will I know the results? Ethan asked. These investigations typically take 2 to 3 weeks. You'll remain in your position during that time, but I'd advise limiting one-on-one interactions with female staff members until this is resolved. The advice felt like a trap. Follow it and confirm the suspicion that he was guilty, or ignore it and risk another complaint. Ethan nodded stiffly, already composing the documentation Margaret had requested in his head. After the meeting dispersed, Sandra lingered, closing the door behind the others. This is orchestrated. Someone with access to HR processes, someone who knows exactly how to file a complaint that will trigger the maximum investigation. Any idea who? My money's on Robert Chen or someone in his orbit. He didn't like being challenged in that budget meeting, and he has the political connections to make something like this happen. She paused. But I can't prove it, and even if I could, calling out the CFO without evidence would be career suicide. So I just endure the investigation and hope the truth comes out? Unless you have a better option. Ethan didn't. He spent the next week compiling the most detailed account of his professional interactions he could manage, cross-referencing with his calendar, his emails, security badge logs that showed when he'd been in which parts of the building. The document grew to 23 pages, each interaction documented with almost obsessive precision. Meanwhile, the HVAC project continued. The new equipment was installed on schedule, and preliminary energy readings showed even better efficiency than Ethan had projected. It should have been a victory, proof of his competence and the value of his institutional knowledge. Instead, it was overshadowed by whispers about the investigation, speculation about what he must have done to warrant such serious allegations. The breaking point came on a Thursday afternoon. Ethan was reviewing installation reports when his office door burst open. A woman he vaguely recognized from accounting stood there, her face flushed with anger. "I just got called into HR," she said without preamble. "They're asking me questions about you, about whether you made me uncomfortable. Do you know how humiliating it is to be interrogated about interactions I barely remember because someone filed a bogus complaint?" "I'm sorry," Ethan said, standing. "I didn't want any of this." "Well, you got it anyway. And now I have to waste my time providing statements about completely innocent conversations so HR can cover themselves." She crossed her arms. "For what it's worth, I told them you've been perfectly professional. Actually, you've been one of the few managers who actually listens when I explain problems instead of dismissing them. But this whole thing is ridiculous, and whoever filed that complaint should be ashamed." After she left, Ethan sat back down heavily. The investigation was hurting more than just him. It was disrupting other people's work, forcing them into uncomfortable situations, creating exactly the kind of hostile environment the complaint had falsely accused him of generating. His phone rang. Victoria's assistant, requesting his immediate presence on the 23rd floor. Ethan took the elevator up, wondering if this was finally the moment when Victoria would tell him the political cost of keeping him was too high, that his experiment in proving kindness and competence mattered more than credentials had failed. But when he entered her office, Victoria wasn't alone. Margaret from HR was there, along with Robert Chen and two other executives Ethan didn't recognize. "Sit down, Ethan," Victoria said, her expression unreadable. He sat, his heart pounding. "The investigation is complete," Margaret said. "After interviewing 12 employees, reviewing security footage, and examining your documented account, we've determined that the allegations were completely without merit. Not a single person corroborated any aspect of the complaint, and several individuals specifically contradicted the claims. The complaint has been dismissed and expunged from your record." Relief washed over Ethan so intensely he felt dizzy. "Thank you." "However," Margaret continued, "we were also able to identify the source of the complaint through digital forensics on the submission. The complaint was filed from a company computer in the finance department." Robert Chen's face had gone carefully blank. "That's a large department. Could have been anyone." "Actually, we were able to narrow it down further. The complaint was filed from your executive assistant's workstation, Mr. Chen." Margaret's voice was professionally neutral, but there was steel underneath. "Your assistant claims she didn't file it, which means either she's lying or someone used her computer without authorization." "My assistant would never," Chen started. "Your assistant also claims she was at lunch when the complaint was filed," Victoria interrupted. "Security badge logs confirm she left the building, which means someone else used her workstation, someone with access to the finance executive floor." She leaned forward. "Someone like you, Robert." The room went deadly quiet. Chen's jaw worked, his hands clenching on the armrests of his chair. "That's a serious accusation, Victoria. One you can't prove." "Can't I? Your calendar shows you were in the office during the filing window. Your assistant keeps meticulous records of who accesses her computer when she's away. And frankly, Robert, you're the only person who had both motive and opportunity." Victoria's voice was cold enough to freeze. "You didn't like being challenged by Ethan in the budget meeting. You didn't like that I promoted someone without an MBA over candidates you preferred. So you decided to eliminate the problem using the most damaging accusation possible." This is speculation," Chen said, but his voice lacked conviction. "It's pattern recognition. You've done this before, Robert. 3 years ago, when Sarah Michaels challenged your accounting methods, she suddenly faced an ethics investigation. 2 years ago, when David Park pushed back on a finance decision, he was accused of insider trading. Both investigations were eventually dismissed, but the damage was done. Careers were derailed, reputations were tarnished. You can't prove any connection. I don't need to prove it in court. This is my company, not a legal proceeding." Victoria stood, and her presence seemed to fill the entire room. "I'm giving you a choice, Robert. You can resign, effective immediately, with a generous severance package and a neutral reference. Or I can launch a formal investigation into your conduct, subpoena all your emails and communications, and make very public exactly how you've weaponized HR processes to eliminate anyone who challenges you." Chen's face had gone from blank to ashen. "You're bluffing. You need me. The board trusts my financial oversight." "The board trusts numbers, Robert. They don't care who produces them as long as they're accurate. And your deputy has been doing most of the actual work for the past 2 years anyway." Victoria's smile was sharp. "So what's it going to be?" The silence stretched out for what felt like an eternity. Ethan sat frozen, watching this power play unfold, realizing that Victoria was doing for him what he could never have done for himself, wielding her authority like a weapon against someone who tried to destroy him. Finally, Chen stood. "I'll have my resignation letter on your desk within the hour. Make it 30 minutes. And Robert, if I hear even a whisper of you trying to sabotage this company or its employees after you leave, I will make sure every detail of your conduct becomes very public. Are we clear?" Chen didn't answer, just turned and walked out, his shoulders rigid with suppressed rage. After he left, the other executives made their excuses and departed quickly, leaving Ethan alone with Victoria and Margaret. "Is it really over?" Ethan asked. "The investigation is closed," Margaret said. "The complaint has been dismissed, and we've documented the false filing for our records. I'm sorry you had to go through this, Mr. Cole. The system is supposed to protect people, not be weaponized against them." After Margaret left, Ethan turned to Victoria. "You didn't have to do that. Force him out. You could have just closed the investigation. And let him try again in 6 months? Or target someone else who challenges him?" Victoria shook her head. "Robert Chen has been a problem for years. I've tolerated him because he was good at his job and the board liked him. But there's a difference between tolerating difficult personalities and enabling people who deliberately harm others. Your situation was the final straw. So I'm the reason the CFO just resigned? You're the catalyst that forced me to finally deal with a problem I should have addressed years ago." Victoria's expression softened. "And before you start feeling guilty, understand that this wasn't about you specifically. It was about establishing that in this company, competence and character matter more than politics and credentials. That people who work hard and act with integrity deserve protection, not persecution. Even when protecting them costs you a CFO? Especially then. Because if I won't stand up for my employees when it's difficult, then all my talk about values is just empty corporate speak." She paused. "How's the HVAC project coming?" The subject change was deliberate, giving Ethan space to process what had just happened. "Ahead of schedule and under budget. The new systems are running at 93% efficiency, which is 7 points better than projected." "Good. When it's complete, I want you to present the results to the board. Show them what institutional knowledge and careful observation can achieve when combined with proper authority." "The board? Victoria, I can't." "You can, and you will. The board needs to see that unconventional promotions can yield exceptional results. They need to understand that the skills required for leadership aren't always the ones taught in business school." Her voice was firm. "You've proven yourself, Ethan, multiple times over. Stop questioning whether you deserve to be here and start owning the fact that you've earned it." The words settled into Ethan's chest, warm and solid. He'd spent weeks fighting to prove himself, defending his presence, apologizing for taking up space. Maybe it was time to stop. "Okay," he said. "I'll present to the board." "Good. Now go home. Spend time with your daughter. The crisis is over." Ethan left her office feeling lighter than he had in weeks. The elevator ride down felt different somehow, like he was moving through the building as someone who belonged rather than someone waiting to be discovered as an imposter. Sandra was waiting by his office when he returned. "I heard Chen's out. Is it true?" "He resigned. Voluntarily?" "More or less." Ethan managed a smile. "Victoria gave him a choice. He chose the dignified exit." Sandra let out a low whistle. "She really went to bat for you. That's going to send a message through the organization." "What kind of message?" "That she's serious about this, about promoting from within, about valuing different kinds of experience, about not tolerating people who abuse power." Sandra leaned against the door frame. "It's going to make some people nervous, but it's also going to give a lot of people hope." Over the next 2 weeks, Ethan felt the shift in how people treated him. The whispers didn't stop entirely, but they changed character. Less speculation about how he'd gotten his position, more curiosity about what he'd do with it. People who'd been coldly professional became cautiously friendly. Department heads who'd dismissed his input started actually listening. The HVAC project completed on schedule, delivering everything Ethan had promised and more. The energy savings were significant enough that Victoria asked him to develop a comprehensive building efficiency strategy for all company facilities. It was exactly the kind of high-visibility project that could establish his reputation beyond the circumstances of his promotion. Ethan dove into the work with the same meticulous attention to detail he'd brought to 7 years of night shifts. He consulted with his team leads, researched best practices, visited the regional offices to understand their specific challenges. The strategy document he produced was 70 pages of carefully researched recommendations backed by cost-benefit analyses and implementation timelines. The board presentation was scheduled for the first week of February. Ethan spent days preparing, rehearsing his talking points, anticipating questions. Lily helped him practice, sitting in their living room and pretending to be a skeptical board member asking tough questions. "Why should we spend millions of dollars on your plan when we could just keep doing what we're doing?" she asked in an exaggerated deep voice. "Because what we're doing is costing us more in the long run," Ethan responded. "Energy inefficiency compounds over time. Emergency repairs are more expensive than preventive maintenance, and employee productivity suffers in uncomfortable work environments. This isn't spending money, it's investing it." "You sound really smart, Dad," Lily said in her normal voice. "The board is going to be impressed." "From your mouth to their ears, Bug." The morning of the presentation, Ethan put on the suit he'd bought specifically for this occasion, his first new suit rather than thrift store finds. Lily insisted on taking another picture, this one properly framed with his face actually visible. "You're going to do great," she said, straightening his tie. "Just remember that you know more about this stuff than anyone in that room. You've been doing this work since before I was born." "How'd you get so good at pep talks?" "I learned from the best," she said, echoing the phrase that had become their private call and response. The boardroom was on the 24th floor, a level Ethan had cleaned countless times but never entered during business hours. 12 board members sat around an enormous table, their combined net worth probably exceeding the GDP of small countries. Victoria sat at the head, her expression encouraging but not protective. This was Ethan's moment to prove himself without her intervention. He set up his presentation, connected his laptop, and took a breath. "Good morning, I'm Ethan Cole, Facilities Operations Manager. 3 months ago, I was working night maintenance in this building. Today, I'm here to show you how 7 years of observation from that perspective has identified opportunities worth millions in efficiency improvements." He clicked to the first slide, a graph showing energy costs across all company facilities over the past decade. The upward trend was stark and undeniable. This is what invisible inefficiency looks like. Small problems compounding over time because the people who noticed them didn't have the authority to fix them, and the people with authority weren't close enough to the operations to see the patterns. For the next 40 minutes, Ethan walked the board through his strategy. He showed them the data he'd collected, the correlations he'd identified, the solutions he'd already implemented successfully. He explained how building systems were like human bodies. Ignore minor symptoms, and eventually they became major crises. The questions came fast and pointed. How did he ensure contractor quality? What metrics would track success? Why should they trust projections from someone with no formal training in facilities management? You shouldn't trust them because of my credentials, Ethan said to that last question. You should trust them because I can show you 7 years of data proving I understand these systems. Because the HVAC project I completed last month came in under budget and exceeded performance targets. Because I've lived in these buildings in ways most facilities managers never do. I've seen what breaks, when it breaks, why it breaks. That's worth more than any degree. One of the board members, an older woman named Patricia, leaned forward. Mr. Cole, this is an impressive presentation. But I have to ask, is this about building efficiency, or is this about proving that Ms. Hale's unorthodox promotion decision was justified? The question hung in the air, the subtext clear. Was this real value or just performance? Ethan met her eyes steadily. Ma'am, with respect, whether my promotion was orthodox or unorthodox is irrelevant to whether this strategy will save the company money. The data stands on its own merit. The projections are conservative and based on proven results. Judge the plan on its merits, not on how I got the authority to present it. Patricia smiled slightly. Fair answer. I moved to approve the strategy with a 6-month pilot program across 3 regional facilities. Seconded, another board member said immediately. The vote was unanimous. Ethan had to work to keep his expression professional as relief and pride warred in his chest. He'd done it. Proven himself to the people who ultimately controlled the company's direction, and done it on merit rather than charity. After the meeting, board members came up to shake his hand, offer congratulations, ask follow-up questions. Patricia lingered after the others had left. You handled yourself well in there, she said, especially when I challenged you. Thank you, though I suspect you already supported the plan before asking the question. Sharp, you're right, I did, but I needed to see how you'd respond to having your credibility questioned, whether you'd get defensive or stick to the facts. She extended her hand. Welcome to leadership, Mr. Cole. You've earned your place here. Victoria caught up with him in the hallway outside the boardroom. Proud of you. That was a masterclass in letting the work speak for itself. I just told the truth. Turns out that's easier than trying to be something I'm not. Funny how that works. She paused. I have something for you. Come by my office tomorrow morning. The next morning, Ethan arrived to find an envelope on Victoria's desk. She handed it to him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Open it. Inside was a letter on official Hale Industries stationery. Ethan scanned it quickly, his eyes widening. It was a promotion, not just a title change, but elevation to Director of Facilities and Operations, with responsibility for all company buildings and a salary increase that made his throat tight. Victoria, this is too much. I've only been in my current role for 3 months. And in those 3 months, you've completed a major infrastructure project ahead of schedule and under budget, developed a comprehensive efficiency strategy that the board unanimously approved, and weathered political attacks that would have broken most people. You've more than earned this. She leaned back in her chair. Besides, I need someone I can trust in this role. Someone who sees the organization clearly because they've lived at every level of it. Someone who understands that leadership isn't about credentials or connections, but about competence and character. I don't know what to say. Say you'll accept it. Say you'll keep proving that my father's belief in the dignity of working people wasn't naive idealism. Say you'll show everyone in this building that kindness and hard work still matter. Ethan thought about that night at the holiday party, about choosing to help someone when everyone else walked away, about Lily's conviction that something good would happen if he took that risk, about every night he'd spent cleaning these floors, every observation he'd documented, every moment he'd felt invisible and chose to show up anyway. I accept, he said, and I'll do my best to honor your father's memory. I know you will. That's why I chose you. That evening, Ethan came home to find Lily waiting with Mrs. Chen, both of them grinning conspiratorially. The small table was set with their best dishes, which meant the ones without chips, and Mrs. Chen had made a lasagna that filled the apartment with warmth and garlic. What's all this? Ethan asked. We're celebrating, Lily announced. Mrs. Chen saw the news on the company website. You got another promotion. I haven't even announced it publicly yet. The internet is very fast, Mr. Cole, Mrs. Chen said with a knowing smile. And very good news should be celebrated right away. They ate together, the three of them, and Ethan felt a contentment he hadn't experienced in years. Not just relief at surviving the challenges, not just pride at his accomplishments, but genuine happiness. The kind that came from being exactly where you were supposed to be, doing work that mattered, with people who loved you. After Mrs. Chen left and Lily was getting ready for bed, she appeared in the living room where Ethan was reviewing the next day's schedule. Dad? Remember when I said something good would happen if you went to the party? I remember. I was right, wasn't I? Ethan pulled her into a hug. You were absolutely right. You saw something I couldn't see. That taking risks, showing kindness, being willing to step outside my comfort zone, those things could actually lead somewhere good. Do you still work too much? Probably, but I'm getting better at balancing it, and this new role will give me more control over my schedule. Good, because I like having you home, she paused. And Dad? I'm really proud of you. Not because of the promotions or the fancy titles, because you helped someone when they needed it, even though it was scary. That's the important part. Out of the mouths of babes, Ethan thought for the third and final time. His daughter understood what many adults never grasped. That character revealed itself in small choices, in moments of decision when the easy path diverged from the right one. Later, after Lily was asleep, Ethan stood at the window of their modest apartment, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there was Hale Industries, the building he'd cleaned for 7 years, where he'd been invisible until one choice changed everything. He thought about Victoria, about her father who'd died invisible and unrecognized, about Marcus, who'd learned to accept limitations that shouldn't have existed, about all the other people in buildings across the city who kept the world running from the shadows, whose work went unnoticed until something broke. And he thought about the opportunity he'd been given, not just to rise himself, but to change how the organization saw people like him, to prove that janitors could become directors, that kindness was strength, that the people everyone overlooked might be exactly who you needed to see. His phone buzzed with an email from Sandra. Heard about the promotion? Well deserved. Your first directive as director should be giving yourself a weekend off. You've earned it. Ethan smiled and typed back. Already planning it. Taking Lily to that new science museum she's been talking about. Then maybe we'll grab pizza and do absolutely nothing work-related for 48 hours. Sandra's response was immediate. Now that's the kind of leadership I can support. On Monday, Ethan would step into his new role with all its responsibilities and challenges. He'd continue learning, continue proving himself, continue working to honor the faith Victoria and his team had placed in him. There would be more obstacles, more people who doubted him, more moments when he'd question whether he truly belonged in rooms where decisions were made and futures were shaped. But for now, in this quiet moment, Ethan allowed himself to simply feel grateful. Grateful for a daughter who believed in everyday magic. Grateful for a CEO who'd been willing to see beyond credentials to character. Grateful for team members who'd given him a chance to prove himself. Grateful for 7 years of invisible work that had prepared him for this visible leadership. He'd started this journey as a janitor, a single father working nights to make ends meet, existing in the margins of other people's important lives. He'd made one choice at a holiday party, to help someone when everyone else walked away. And that choice had revealed a truth he'd forgotten. That he mattered. That his work mattered. That who he was when no one was watching mattered most of all. Victoria's father had believed in the dignity of working people, had died believing it even when the world seemed determined to prove him wrong. But maybe, Ethan thought, maybe that man hadn't been wrong. Maybe dignity wasn't given by titles or salaries or recognition. Maybe it was something you carried in yourself, something that existed in the choice to show up, do the work, and treat people with kindness regardless of whether anyone noticed. And sometimes, just sometimes, people did notice. Sometimes kindness was recognized, hard work was rewarded, and invisible men were finally seen. Ethan closed the blinds, turned off the lights, and went to check on Lily one more time before bed. She was curled up with her library books, peaceful in sleep, dreaming whatever dreams filled the mind of a 9-year-old who still believed the world could be fair. He kissed her forehead gently, whispered that he loved her, and pulled her blanket up against the December cold. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new responsibilities, new opportunities to prove that his promotion was earned rather than given. But tonight, standing in his daughter's doorway watching her sleep, Ethan Cole felt something he hadn't felt in years. He felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. And that, he decided, was the real magic Lily had predicted. Not the promotions or the salary or the recognition, but the simple truth that showing up as your best self, choosing kindness when it would be easier to walk away, and believing in the dignity of honest work could actually lead somewhere good. The invisible man had been seen, and in being seen, had learned to see himself differently too. Not as someone who didn't belong in rooms where decisions were made, but as someone whose perspective from the margins offered insights the center couldn't see. Not as someone who'd gotten lucky through one act of kindness, but as someone who'd been proving himself through competence and character for years before anyone bothered to notice. And most importantly, not as someone who needed to apologize for taking up space, but as someone who'd earned his place through 7 years of showing up, paying attention, and choosing to be excellent even when excellence went unrecognized. The story that had started with a drunk CEO at a holiday party and a janitor who chose to help her ended not with grand gestures or dramatic vindication, but with something quieter and more profound. A man coming home to his daughter, stepping into a future built on kindness and competence, and finally believing he deserved it. Because he did deserve it, and Lily had been right all along. Something good had happened, something better than either of them could have imagined. Not because the world was fair, but because one person had chosen to make it a little bit fairer through the simple act of seeing another human being and refusing to look away. That was the kind of magic worth believing in, the kind that changed lives one small choice at a time.